They called me Ops Ghost like I was some kind of urban legend haunting the back end. No name in meetings, no credit in quarterly updates, just a green status dot blinking beside Pulse Grid in the system's dashboard, as if that little pulse icon ran on corporate fairy dust and good intentions. Let me break it to you gently. Pulse Grid was me. Every real-time ops sync, every finance reconciliation, every client metric dashboard that magically loaded in under a second, that was my code, my logic, my system. But say that too loud and suddenly it's not a team player, right? I knew how forgotten I'd become the day I walked past the lunchroom and heard someone say, "Wait, is Linda still here?" Not sarcastic, just genuinely unaware. That's the level of erasure we're working with. Never mind that Pulse Grid basically duct-taped Advena Tech's broken bones together for 5 years straight. Never mind that when accounting had a panic attack mid-close last quarter, it was my undocumented rollback patch that saved the day. Never mind all that, because I didn't evangelize it with enough color-coded charts and pizza party pitches, I guess. Now don't get me wrong, I wasn't looking for some damn ticker tape parade. I like my quiet. I like my 3-monitor desk setup in the corner nobody wants because the air vent hisses like a demon with asthma. I like being able to hear my thoughts without Todd from sales hovering behind me asking how Wi-Fi works. I even liked our outdated coffee machine, bitter, ancient, and deeply disapproving, just like me. But what I didn't like, what I started to notice, was the way they'd smile too long when they said thanks for your help, and then CC someone 3 rungs above me when they actually push something live. Oh, and hey, since you've made it this far, do me a solid. Hit that little subscribe button and toss a like on this. It really motivates the team that helps me tell these stories, and honestly, they deserve the credit I never got. All right, back to the ghost story. So yes, I'd become invisible, but invisibility has perks. People forget you're in the room, they forget you have root access. They forget you wrote the code that writes the code. I'd be in those architecture strategy meetings where some shiny new hire from Stanford would wave their hands and say we needed a next-gen pipeline with dynamic cache logic, and I'd just sip my cold tea while Pulse Grid already did that silently, without drama, since 2019. Most of them thought Pulse Grid was open source. One guy, no joke, actually asked me if it was one of those pre-baked GitHub things. I told him yes because I didn't feel like explaining how I architected it over 4 Christmases, 2 hurricanes, and 1 gallbladder surgery. Leadership just saw it as this magical artifact. Like a vending machine, push the button, get the number. Nobody ever wonders who refills the snacks. That was me. The snack refiller of Advena Tech's digital bloodstream. My official title was Systems Optimization Lead, which is the kind of made-up nonsense HR cooks up when they can't justify your salary but don't want to lose you to a competitor. My unofficial title was, If Linda Quits, Everything Breaks. Not that they knew that, not yet. I was okay with being overlooked until I wasn't. Until the day I walked into the server room and found 3 strangers from vendor strategy standing over Pulse Grid's deployment logs like they'd discovered fire. Until the moment I saw that smug little smirk on the new COO's face. That's when I realized they weren't ignoring me anymore. They were circling, buzzing, like flies that think the meat's already dead. And meat doesn't usually bite back. But this time, oh honey, this time it had fangs. The first time I saw Chad Foster, he was wearing a shirt so tight it looked painted on, strutting through the hallway like he was auditioning for a reboot of Wall Street, the kind where Gordon Gekko sells Saw S instead of stocks. He had one of those Bluetooth earpieces jammed permanently in his ear like a cyborg birthmark, and he talked like a man who thought PowerPoint slides could solve world hunger. "Let's talk velocity," he said in his first all hands. "Let's disrupt from the inside out." He hadn't even figured out where the bathrooms were yet, and he was already throwing around words like synergy stack realignment and cloud-native agility. I watched from my usual back row seat, sipping lukewarm coffee from a chipped mug that said world's okayest engineer and thought, here it comes. The cleanse, the whiteboard exorcism, the new broom that sweeps out anything that doesn't sparkle under a ring light. And sure enough, 2 days later I got a calendar invite from someone named Alexis in Tech Strategy Enablement, which is corporate for we're here to gut the thing you built and call it innovation. The subject line said, Pulse Grid, Dependency Map and Ownership Clarification. Clarification, huh? I opened the invite and stared at it for a solid 30 seconds. My stomach didn't drop. My blood didn't boil. It was worse than that. I felt cold. Like I'd just stepped into a freezer and realized I was the turkey. You don't ask for ownership clarification on something that's not about to be handed off, repackaged, or sold to some chucklehead vendor with a 3-slide pitch deck and a stolen Stack Overflow script. Still, I showed up, sat through their slideshow, listened to Alexis chirp about unified telemetry and upstream extensibility. They didn't even look at me while they spoke, like I was part of the carpet, like I was a time capsule they had to dust off before repurposing the land. Finally, Chad glanced at me briefly and said, Linda, if you could just outline all known dependencies and pain points for Pulse Grid, think of it like you're preparing for someone else to take the wheel. My mouth didn't move. I nodded, wrote it down, walked out. and started checking every single access log like my job depended on it because suddenly it did. Within a week, his little swarm had embedded itself. Consultants with expensive haircuts and matching MacBooks began drifting in and out of the Pulse Grid shell like bees in heat. I caught one of them, Ryan, I think, trying to run a schema diff without sandboxing it first. If I hadn't shadow flagged that attempt, the finance dashboard would have spit out numbers that looked like lottery picks. No one asked before poking around. No one notified me when they cloned the repo. They just assumed the system was plug and play, that they could unplug the brain and stick it into a prettier skull. I confronted Alexis after hours one day. She was microwaving cauliflower pizza in the break room and pretending to enjoy it. Hey, I said, calm and deliberate. Pulse Grid doesn't have documentation for a reason. I designed it to self-evolve based on conditional flag triggers. Anyone poking around needs admin clearance and context. Without it, she cut me off with a fake smile. Thanks, Linda. That's exactly why we're transitioning. We need systems that scale without being, tribal knowledge dependent. Tribal knowledge, that's what they called my life's work. As if I'd spent 5 years scratching code into the walls of a cave with a bone. That's when it clicked. They weren't just here to modernize, they were here to erase. Quietly, thoroughly. Strip the engine from the car and paint the shell neon green. The next morning, my Slack permissions changed. I wasn't in the hash pulse grid core channel anymore. I wasn't in the sprint planning invite list. My access to Jenkins, limited, Git repo, view only. The system I built brick by digital brick was being barricaded from me. But here's the thing they didn't understand. I am the system. They can change all the locks they want. I forged the damn keys. They gave the town hall a stupid name, Momentum Unleashed. I remember that. Like we were all part of some overcaffeinated racehorse that needed to be let out of the gate by Chad Foster, our glorious COO, deliverer of agile synergy and other sacred nonsense. They made a whole event page for it. Sent out branded Zoom backgrounds, had a countdown timer, and hold music like we were tuning in for the Super Bowl instead of a glorified monologue about transformational org design. I logged in late on purpose. Video off. Mic muted, just a silent box named L. Monroe at the bottom of the participant list. By now, I'd been fully transitioned from Linda the quietly essential to Linda, the legacy attachment. They kept me around like a Christmas ornament no one wanted to hang, afraid I'd break if they touched me but too nervous to throw away. Chad, naturally, kicked off with a motivational quote misattributed to Einstein and a joke about how hard it is to uninstall old software, which I'm pretty sure was about people like me. The guy loved his metaphors. I'm surprised he didn't wheel out a whiteboard and draw a stick figure choking on outdated code. I only started paying attention when they switched to the slide labeled Next Gen Partnerships. That's when my ears perked up. Pulse Grid's modular transition will position us for scalable alignment with our external solution ecosystem, Chad said. I blinked. Modular transition. External ecosystem? He kept going, voice slick and rehearsed. We've already begun integrating with Velaventrix partners to ensure continuity while reducing tribal friction. There it was again, tribal, like I was a feral raccoon hoarding variables in a cave. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I almost typed something in the chat. Almost. And then it happened. He leaned sideways just a little and turned to one of the consultants sitting beside him. Could tell he thought he'd muted himself because his face relaxed, and that phony executive sparkle dropped just a hair. And then he said it. Honestly, he belongs in the basement with his little tool. He chuckled. The consultant did too. One of those awful, nasal little laughs like a balloon deflating through a straw. The pause that followed was unnatural. You could feel the entire company trying to process what they'd just heard. And then the chat exploded. Wait, did we all just hear that? Who's he? OMG, someone forgot to mute? I sat there, frozen, tea cooling in my hand, Slack lighting up like a Christmas tree. And all I could think about was that he, the guy with the little tool in the basement, was me. He didn't even know. That's what made it worse. He looked straight into the camera, not a flicker of realization on his smug little face. Never even considered that Linda might be the architect behind Pulse Grid. That I, woman, middle-aged, non-flashy, non-networky, could be the creator of the thing they were selling out from under me. He assumed I was a man. He assumed I was irrelevant. He assumed wrong. There was no apology, no follow-up email from HR. Just radio silence and a quiet shift in tone across the office. People avoided eye contact. The same ones who used to ping me after hours with quick fixes suddenly forgot I existed. I didn't respond, didn't demand an explanation, didn't ask for retraction. Instead, I took the rest of the day off, logged out, closed the laptop, sat in the dark of my living room with a glass of wine and an old notebook from Pulse Grid's early days where I'd mapped out the entire infrastructure on the back of a bar napkin during a snowstorm. And I decided, fine. If I'm the ghost in the basement with the little tool, then maybe it's time to let the house burn. It started with the test branch. Little blip in Git I wasn't supposed to see, buried under a label so vague it practically screamed guilt. Refactor V1 for external. Not a word to me about it. No tickets, no handoff request. No hey Linda, mind walking us through the logic you wrote that's kept the company from descending into data hell for half a decade? Just code. My code. rearranged like furniture by someone who didn't know which pieces were load-bearing. It moved fast after the hot mic debacle. Too fast, like a magician waving one hand while the other picks your pocket. My Slack channels began vanishing one by one. First hash Pulse Grid Core, then hash Data Integrity, then even hash Coffee Club, which only had 3 members and mostly cat memes. My role was being scrubbed quietly. No formal demotion, no confrontation, just deletion. One permission toggle at a time. By Friday, my Jenkins access was revoked completely. I got a canned message from IT saying they were restructuring admin controls for security alignment. Security alignment, my ass? The only thing they were aligning was the noose. Still, I played dumb, nodded during meetings, took notes I didn't need, smiled politely while Chad walked around puffed up like a rooster in a startup hoodie, kept referring to Pulse Grid as the backbone of our monetization pivot, like he'd written it himself in a fever dream after snorting lines of ChatGPT prompts. The moment that truly lit the fuse, though, was a Monday morning when I passed the West Conference Room and saw them, the new devs. They were all clustered around a TV screen displaying Pulse Grid's architecture map. My architecture map. I recognized the color coding. I recognized the annotation style. One of them even had a screenshot of a script I'd written and saved under the file name Lynn's Silent Logger v3, Pi, which was never meant to be shared. I stood there for a beat too long. One of the kids looked up, couldn't have been older than 24, probably thought YAML was a new brand of vape juice and actually waved at me, like I was a friendly ghost peeking in from another dimension. Morning, he chirped. I nodded and kept walking. Didn't say a word. That afternoon I started printing things. Not company secrets, nothing technically illegal, just logs, version histories, internal memos, old diagrams, emails with vague language about ownership reassessment and code migration strategy, anything that smelled like premeditated theft, and I backed up everything twice. One copy on a personal encrypted drive. The other, well, that one had a home they'd never find. Let's just say if you bury something deep enough in legal compliance systems, it becomes more secure than Fort Knox behind a firewall of boredom. That night, I went home and pulled out the old contract file I kept in my closet. The one from 3 years ago when they asked me to lead a vendor resiliency update and let me sneak in clauses no one bothered to read. One of them, buried under a subsection of a subsection, was labeled IP Reversion Protocol, Section 14.3b. It was dry, technical, dull enough that even legal had skimmed it. But if someone moved Pulse Grid externally without my written approval, if even one byte was transferred outside the bounds of our internal systems, the clause kicked in automatically. Access revoked. Audit logs preserved. Full rollback initiated. The clause was designed for doomsday, and wouldn't you know it, they just handed me the launch codes. Velaventrix was the name floating around now. Some strategic partner Chad had brought in from his old playground, promising to productize Pulse Grid. I'd seen their slide deck, buzzwords stacked like a game of Jenga, AI-driven predictive scalability, integrated user telemetry, client-flexible modularity. All of it built on the assumption they could crack open my system like a coconut and pour the juice into their own jar. The thing is, Pulse Grid wasn't built like normal software. It wasn't modular. It wasn't plug-and-play. It was a living, breathing, messy organism. There were dependencies nested inside dependencies, scripts that only triggered under obscure conditions, and logic webs even I had to diagram to remember. You don't just lift it out and hand it to a third-party vendor without consequence, unless you're arrogant or stupid or both. I started watching the logs more obsessively. Nightly commits, access IPs, endpoint pings. If they were going to walk into the lion's den, I was going to make sure they tripped every hidden wire on the way in. And I wouldn't make a sound. Not yet. It was 3 years ago. On a Thursday so forgettable, I only remember it because the cafeteria ran out of forks, and I had to eat a sad little microwave lasagna with a plastic knife. I was sitting in a freezing side office with a migraine, a broken radiator, and a compliance spreadsheet open so wide it looked like a crime scene. That was the day the seed got planted. The day I realized the only way to protect Pulse Grid was to hide a tripwire inside the very thing no one ever bothers to check, the paperwork. Back then, we were still a mid-sized tech firm pretending to be a startup, obsessed with disaster recovery. Cyber attacks, ransomware, alien invasions, our legal team wanted contingencies for everything but actual competence. They called it the Vendor Failover Protocol Initiative. Basically, if the building caught fire or someone spilled soup on the servers, we needed to know how to keep operations running. Naturally, they handed it to me. Linda, just plug your systems into the dock, said Ken from legal, spinning in his chair like a toddler on a sugar rush. Make it look airtight. We're presenting to the board next week. He didn't care how it worked, just needed it to look like it did. So I buried myself in jargon and insurance lingo, layered it with so much enterprise static that reading more than 3 lines without falling asleep required military training. But in the middle of it, I saw my chance. You see, I'd already been through a smaller betrayal a year before that. a failed acquisition that almost ripped Pulse Grid from our servers and handed it to a firm that thought MongoDB was a dessert. I remember staying up until 2 a.m. refactoring my code to untangle it from the APIs they tried to duct tape to it. No warning. No thanks. Just we'll take it from here, Linda. That night, I realized I'd built the entire system. They just signed the paychecks. So in that vendor failover doc under Section 9, asset reconciliation in the event of externalization, I added a tiny clause, just a few lines, buried under 5 subpoints in a whole paragraph about offsite backups. Clause Section 14.3b, IP Reversion Protocol. Legalese translation: if core system intellectual property, defined by access logs and usage metrics, is transferred, cloned, or exposed to any non-contracted external party without written sign-off from the original architect, me, the system automatically enters reversion mode. Access denied. Server-level lockdown. Audit logs frozen for review. Oh, and it would generate a little message, just one sentence. IP reversion executed. See clause section 14.3b. I wrapped it in so much compliance wrapping paper that not even our GC noticed. They were too busy asking if we had active shooter protocol language. I saved the document, uploaded it to our internal compliance vault, printed a copy and had Ken sign off with his usual chicken scratch initials. Then I let it sit, waiting, dormant, because I knew the day would come, not because I'm a pessimist, because I'm a realist, because sooner or later someone always walks into the server room with a golden ticket and thinks, I can take this. That clause, that was my hand on the detonator. Little insurance policy, in case some future Chad Foster swaggered in with glossy hair, and a 5-year plan to unlock new monetization potential by slicing my system open and selling the pieces to the highest bidder. And now, 3 years later, that exact thing was happening. Velaventrix was sniffing around, poking code they didn't understand, smiling for boardroom presentations like they were already cashing the checks. Only this time there was a clause. Only this time. The locks were rigged, and they hadn't read the fine print. The email wasn't even meant for me. That's what made it perfect. It leaked from a forwarded thread. Someone in marketing accidentally pasted it into a shared Google Doc and forgot to restrict permissions. I only saw it because I was helping format a launch deck on a lazy Friday afternoon, trying to keep my hands busy while my brain ticked like a time bomb. Subject line: Q3 Strategic Consolidation Pulse Grid Transition Plan. The message was short, self-congratulatory, and reeked of hubris. The kind of corporate backpatting that makes you want to slap someone with a whiteboard marker. Chad Foster's name was all over it. Finalizing the transition of Pulse Grid to Velaventrix Partners for productization under Q3 roadmap. Anticipated rollout to client sandbox environments by July 15. Documentation and knowledge transfer in progress. Anticipate full integration by Q4. Knowledge transfer, full integration, client sandbox. I stared at the screen, my coffee forgotten, growing colder by the minute. They were actually doing it, pulling the pin, moving Pulse Grid out of the building without ever consulting me, notifying me, or asking for anything more than a glorified dependency list. I thought I'd just fade into the background like a deprecated package. They had no idea the box was wired. I didn't react, didn't forward it, didn't even screenshot it. I just sat there and read it 3 more times, each line settling like a weight behind my eyes. Then I closed the browser, opened my private documentation archive, and began my checklist. Because what they didn't understand, what they never understood, was that Pulse Grid wasn't just software, wasn't a product. It was an ecosystem held together by invisible ligaments, many of which ran through me. You don't just transition something like that. You don't uproot a tree that deep without snapping something vital. I checked the access logs again that night, Saturday, 2:37 a.m. A new IP had cloned the full system repo and pushed it into a secure third-party Git instance hosted by Velaventrix. The branch was labeled PG External Deploy. And just like that, Section 14.3b whispered to life. The protocol didn't trigger on access. It triggered on migration. And migration had just happened. One more step and the reversion clause would go live. They'd clicked the pen. They just hadn't signed the check yet. Monday morning came and went without a single email in my inbox. No invite to a transfer call. No documentation request. No mention of my name in any meeting summary or Slack thread. It was like I'd been erased entirely. Like Pulse Grid had sprung into existence from thin air and was now being handed over to a bunch of product guys with clean fingernails and zero clue what the hell they were holding. The transition continued in full theater mode. PowerPoint decks, glossy charts, LinkedIn updates with hashtags like #NextGenOps and #PulseForward. Chad strutted through the halls like he'd just invented post-it notes. I passed one of the Velaventrix suits in the elevator. He smiled, gave me that salesman nod like I was the janitor, and asked, "Hey, do you know where the server cage is?" I pointed without a word. Let him walk straight into his own grave. Behind the curtain, my system was quietly preparing for war. The moment external access triggered production-level authorization, the kill switch would activate. Log files would lock, dashboards would fail, authentication tokens would void. The only way back in would be through me, and they'd need a key I never gave them. By Wednesday, the company held a champagne toast in the break room. A literal toast. I watched from a distance as Chad clinked glasses with the Velaventrix team, delivering some pompous speech about unlocking scalability and modernizing our tech DNA. The interns smiled. The execs pretended to understand. Board reps stood there, nodding, counting invisible money. Not one of them noticed the blood-red indicator light blinking on the pulse grid dev terminal behind the glass. Reversion ready, true it was all going according to plan. They thought they were building momentum, but they were just walking deeper into the fuse. The office was quiet the day before the handoff. Too quiet. The kind of quiet you only get right before a storm or right after a crime. I sat at my desk, the same corner desk I'd occupied for 5 years, the one with the humming vent above and the view of the dumpster below, and watched the pulse grid status dashboard spin like nothing had changed. But everything had. I'd spent the night before pulling together the last pieces. First, the clause activation logs, time-stamped, cross-referenced, and signed with internal system certs that no one else even knew existed. Every IP access, every unauthorized push, every clone action outside the bounds of our internal infrastructure. I packaged them into a folder labeled Clause 14.3, B Activation Path Legal Reference Copy. Then I emailed a single sentence to my lawyer, confirming all conditions for reversion protocol have now been met. Archive package enclosed. He responded 5 minutes later with a thumbs-up emoji and the words "nice trap." I encrypted the archive twice, once under my standard 256-bit key, and again under the company's own compliance schema, just to be poetic about it. I burned it to a single, clean USB drive. No stickers, no label, just matte black plastic and quiet revenge. At 3:32 p.m., I walked down the beige hallway to the legal wing, same hallway I'd walked 100 times back when people still knew who I was. Back when Linda from Ops meant something other than an echo. I passed a junior associate who looked up at me and smiled nervously, like he'd seen a ghost. I nodded and placed the folder, USB inside, directly on the VP of Legal's desk. No appointment, no chit-chat. He was in a meeting anyway, probably drafting a press release about how Pulse Grid will elevate cross-industry solutions through collaborative partnerships. The cover page of the folder was plain, bold black font. Reversion Protocol, Section 14.3b beneath it. Authorization pending external activation. I didn't sign it, I didn't need to. My signature was already encoded in every trigger node inside the Pulse Grid system. The moment they ran a production-level data pull from Velaventrix's environment, the clause would go live. Access revoked. Server lockdown, audit freeze. And if everything timed just right, a single message would appear across every Pulse Grid terminal on launch morning. IP reversion executed. See clause section 14.3b. At 4:00 p.m. sharp, I submitted my PTO request through HR's archaic system. 1 week, effective immediately. No reason given. Just a note that said out of office, please contact legal if urgent. I shut down my workstation, wiped the coffee ring off my desk with a napkin I'd saved from an old company party, and walked out without saying goodbye. The elevators were slow, like they knew. As I waited, I looked back down the hall, past the glass conference rooms, past the intern with the bubble tea, past the laminated motivational posters that promised innovation lives here. No one noticed me leave. That was the point. Because by the time they did notice me, by the time they realized Pulse Grid wasn't theirs to sell, repackage, or rebrand, I'd be 3 states away, drinking cheap wine with my feet in a river, watching the fuse burn. And it was burning. Quietly, beautifully, because the best kind of chaos isn't loud, it's precise. They called it launch day. There were balloons in the main lobby, actual balloons. Some poor intern had been tasked with inflating them at 7 a.m. and tying them to a sign that read, Pulse Grid 2.0 powered by Velaventrix. I saw a photo later, posted to LinkedIn by one of the vendor reps, captioned, excited to activate next-gen infrastructure with the amazing Advena tech team. The timestamp on that post was 9:14 a.m. The reversion triggered at 9:17. It started with the server room. Velaventrix had flown in 2 of their senior integration engineers, identical twins in khakis and confidence, armed with fresh keycards and a checklist printed on glossy paper. They tried to badge into the secure ops floor like they owned the place. The lights above the reader turned red. Denied. They tried again. Denied. Then they noticed it. Taped to the glass door of the server room in clean Helvetica was a single white sheet of paper. IP reversion executed. See clause section 14.3b. No signature. No contact info. No instructions. Just that. One of them pulled out a phone and called someone. The other started pacing. A passing facilities guy asked if they needed help. They didn't answer. Someone took a picture of the letter and sent it to legal. Inside the building, dashboards began crashing. First, the client metrics went dark. Then finance. Then the operations command console, one that fed data into the nightly board reports, began looping a single error: pulse grid auth token invalid. Retry failed, reversion active. Slack lit up like a Christmas tree on fire. Panic messages flew across departments. Did anyone push an update? Is the system down? Why is everything redirecting to an error page? Who has access? Chad Foster was mid-call with investors when the news hit. He didn't mute his mic this time. Didn't need to. Everyone heard him slam the table. What the hell is a reversion protocol? I imagine someone whispered my name right about then. Maybe Alexis. Maybe one of the few engineers left who still remembered where Pulse Grid came from. But by the time legal found the folder on the VP's desk, the one I'd left with the USB drive and the clause, neatly printed and highlighted, they were already too late. The system had locked. The audit logs had frozen, and every access point outside the building was now flagged and firewalled under the terms they'd approved 3 years ago without reading a damn thing. Chad's calendar invite for the Pulse Grid global demo was still live. But the system, it was not. Finance tried to reroute through a backup module, but the dependencies were all hardwired. Legal tried to call Velaventrix, but their team was demanding answers of their own. What clause? Who's Linda? Do you mean the system isn't transferable? And meanwhile, across the country, in a quiet cabin 2 miles off a highway no one cared about, I sat on a screened-in porch with a second cup of coffee and a cheap Bluetooth speaker playing low jazz. My phone buzzed once, just once. An old coworker sent a screenshot. It was the Pulse Grid login page, but the color scheme was gone, just black and white now. And in the middle was the line I'd hard-coded to appear when the reversion was final: unauthorized external transition detected. IP ownership protected under Section 14.3b. Contact original architect for resolution. There was no contact link, no button, no path forward, just silence. And I smiled, not because I'd crippled them, not because their big demo was dead before it started. I smiled because they'd walked right into the trap, rating their ignorance like a banner, never once considering that the woman they dismissed, insulted, erased, might be the only one holding the keys. Pulse Grid was never theirs. And now they knew. The emergency board meeting was called for 8 a.m. sharp because when 7 departments crash in under 12 minutes and a multimillion-dollar demo dies on impact, people tend to panic in a synchronized fashion. They booked the big room. Glass walls. Polished wood. That one awkwardly placed ficus someone always knocks over. Chad was already seated when the board trickled in, sleeves rolled up, red-eyed, pacing between bottled water and self-destruction. Legal came in last. The VP carried a printed packet of papers in one hand, my folder in the other. You could see it before he even opened his mouth, he knew. He knew, and not just what happened, but who had made it happen. His eyes flicked to the door every 5 seconds like he was waiting for a ghost to arrive. He sat down, cleared his throat, and began reading aloud. Clause Section 14.3b, drafted and approved in 2020 under the Vendor Failover Protocol Initiative, states that all core operational IP, including but not limited to Pulse Grid and derivative systems, shall remain under the explicit control of the original architect, unless written sign-off is provided prior to external migration or duplication. He paused, looked around the table. No such sign-off was obtained. Migration logs confirm transfer to Velaventrix without authorization. The clause executed automatically. System locked, logs frozen. The boardroom fell silent except for the quiet creak of someone shifting in their leather chair. Wait, one of them said, blinking. Are you saying she still owns it? The VP nodded. Linda Monroe is the registered IP architect. She hard-coded the clause into the compliance protocol. She didn't approve the transfer. Another silence. Then a whisper just loud enough to carry. How the hell wasn't this caught? Chad looked like someone had poured boiling water down his spine. Red-faced, breathing too hard. He started mumbling about integration teams and assumption chains and legal oversights. Every word made him smaller. That's when the door opened. I didn't say anything, didn't smile. Just walked in calm as a snowfall. Set a matte black USB drive on the center of the table next to the untouched bowl of complimentary mints. Logs, I said, and proof. No one asked what kind, they knew. Chad finally looked up, and for the first time in his whole tenure at Advena Tech, he had nothing to say. Not a buzzword, not a single line of bluff or corporate poetry. Just a twitch in his jaw and a long, hard stare at the drive. One board member leaned forward. Linda, can this be undone? I looked at him calmly, not cruelly, and shook my head. The clause executed because the system was stolen, not migrated, not transitioned. Stolen, and that clause doesn't pause, it detonates. Murmurs erupted. Legal started flipping pages. Someone knocked over their coffee. I waited until the noise died down, then stepped forward, placing both hands on the table. You sold something. I said that was never yours to sell, and just like that, the room deflated. There was no slow clap, no triumphant music, just the weight of consequences settling into expensive suits. They didn't stand, didn't argue, didn't thank me. I turned and walked out. Pulse Grid wasn't theirs. It never had been. Now they remembered whose name was buried in its bones, and I didn't need a title or a desk or a padded LinkedIn headline to prove it. I had something better. Control. Appreciate you sticking around, you legends of the break room. Subscribe for more chaos. Let's make your old managers spill their coffee in fear. Barbara, can you check the server logs from that March audit? Grayson's legal asked about a timestamp and Drew can't find it. That was at 9:14 a.m. By 9:22, I'd already pulled the logs, cross-verified the document ID, and sent the exact timestamp with a screenshot, a backup PDF, and a list of everyone who accessed the file in the last 12 months. No one said thank you. They rarely did. 17 years in this firm, and I still had to remind interns how to save a PDF correctly. I was the ghost in the machine, the shadow fixer, the person whose name only came up when something broke or something didn't, and they didn't know which was worse. But Grayson defense knew. Grayson didn't tolerate sloppiness. They were a government-facing client with a spine made of legal clauses and a heartbeat driven by trust. And I was their trust. I was the only reason we still held that $50 million renewal after the 2016 year breach. I was the reason their auditors no longer asked for pre-calls. The contracts were structured around me. Literally. After the vendor mix-up 8 years ago, Grayson's general counsel rewrote Clause 11.2 to mandate that only I, Barbara K. Fulton, could authorize the strategic account sign-off. No one in this office read beyond slide decks anymore. I didn't dress loud. I didn't post Slack emojis. I didn't circle back or touch base. I just showed up, did my job better than anyone else in the building, and went home to my cat, my Kindle, and my slightly overwatered fiddle leaf fig. I was 54, single by choice, and kept a small stash of bourbon in my credenza behind a fake cough drop box. My wins weren't celebrated. They were assumed. Drew changed that. He came in like a startup fever dream, buttoned shirt too tight around the arms, talking in acronyms and acting like PowerPoint was a personality. Strategic Accounts VP, imported from some firm in Boston with a lowercase name and a neon logo. The kind of place where they call mass layoffs talent realignment. Within a week, he was best friends with Lindsay from marketing, who also happened to be the CEO's niece. By week 3, my calendar invites started vanishing like socks in a dryer. But I didn't push back. I documented. Every invite removed, every email I was looped out of, every time my reports were summarized and sent without credit. I wasn't being paranoid. I was preparing. Side note, since you're here and still listening, if stories like this hit home, or if you've ever had a Drew erase your name from a win you carried solo, take a second to subscribe or tap that like. It actually helps the team bring more of these stories to light. And frankly, some of us find this therapeutic. Anyway, back to Tuesday morning. I was finishing a call with Grayson's project lead Joel about rollout timelines when I noticed something odd. The new internal doc portal, the one Drew championed, listed him as the primary contact for Grayson. Not me. I refreshed it, checked the metadata. It actually changed the contract archive naming convention. My initials were gone. No one told me, no one asked. Joel didn't sound concerned. As long as you're still on the signature line, Barbara, we're good. We trust you. I smiled, but my stomach tightened. That afternoon, Drew's assistant accidentally booked my desk space out to a new junior hire for Q1. Oh, must have been a system glitch. Sure, the week after. Lindsay sent out a holiday project alignment email to the entire strategic accounts team. I wasn't on it. The subject line read, Christmas roster final. Final, cute, and that's how it started. Not with fireworks, not with screaming matches, with absence, with little deletions. My erasure began in lowercase, but they forgot something important. I may not have had their spotlight, but I had the pen. Drew Thompson arrived on a Monday with the kind of handshake that lasted 2 seconds too long, and a cologne that said, I mistake confidence for competence. He introduced himself at the all-hands by saying, let's disrupt some silos, and I knew right then I was screwed. He wore all birds and carried a MacBook like it was a trophy. He called our weekly planning sessions stand-ups even though no one stood. Within 3 days, he had installed a new Slack bot named Pulsey that asked people how they were feeling every morning and rewarded collaborative vibes with emoji badges. By day 5, he was taking Lindsay from marketing out for brainstorm lattes and name-dropping her uncle, the CEO, like it was part of his compensation package. I watched him circle our team like a vulture that did CrossFit. He never asked questions, just assumed authority. I'd spent 17 years building the Grayson account into a stable, low-friction pipeline that ran like a Swiss watch, and this guy was already talking about shaking the tree and disrupting legacy handoffs. Legacy handoffs, that was me. I was the damn tree. On Wednesday, he scheduled a sync with me to align account trajectories. I came prepared with a full breakdown of current deliverables, the timeline for the renewal, open items flagged by Grayson's procurement, and the escalation paths I'd built over the years. He didn't read any of it. He smiled like he was interviewing me for a role I already had. Barbara, I want you to really lean out of the weeds. Empower the new team. You've earned that altitude, right? I didn't blink. You're saying I should remove myself from Grayson? He chuckled like I'd misunderstood the gospel. Not remove, elevate. Let Lindsay and Dylan lead the renewal pitch. New blood shows momentum. I've seen tornadoes in Ohio with less spin than that sentence. That afternoon, I checked the recurring calendar invites I'd maintained for over a decade: Grayson Weekly Check-In, Vendor Sync, Audit Prep, SLA Review, and saw that I'd been removed from 5 of them. No notification. Just gone. I didn't confront him. I just opened a new folder on my desktop, KM Changelog. Every removed invite went in. Every forwarded thread with my name scrubbed from the to line. Every document rebranded with Dylan Final when I was the one who wrote the damn thing. Then came the weird part. Drew started dropping hints. Subtle digs during meetings. Barbara's got the historicals, but we're looking forward now. Or, we don't need to reinvent the wheel unless the wheel's been static. Lindsay giggled. Dylan nodded like a bobblehead with a minor concussion. I watched them replace quality with quantity PowerPoints with 7 fonts, one-liners with no substance. They were spray painting strategy over a foundation I built with sweat and post-its and late-night compliance calls. And the higher-ups, they loved it because it looked like action, looked like change. But Grayson didn't care about motion. They cared about control. And Drew was about to find out what happens when you mistake noise for leverage. By Friday, I'd become a relic. People stopped asking me about policy updates. The junior team, some of whom I'd mentored, started routing questions to Lindsay. And then came the Christmas party invite list. We got it via HR Slack. Please confirm your availability for the Strategic Accounts holiday dinner. RSVP by noon. I wasn't on the CC list. I clicked on the shared doc. My name wasn't there. Later that day, Lindsay walked past my desk, holding an envelope of branded holiday cards, humming Jingle Bell Rock. Drew trailed behind her, balancing 2 peppermint mochas and saying, "We'll keep it lean this year, only the core folks." He caught my eye, grinned, and added, "Streamlined roster." Gotta love it. I didn't answer. Instead, I added one more item to the KM changelog: Deck 15 final holiday invite list. Barbara Fulton omitted. Then I opened my inbox and submitted a PTO request for the week of the Grayson renewal signing. Let's see how the core folks do without me. It was a Thursday morning, 2 weeks before Christmas, and the team meeting had all the fake cheer of a mall Santa with a court date. We were gathered in Conference B, where someone had laid out lukewarm Starbucks travelers and a tray of shortbread cookies that tasted like printer paper. Drew stood at the front with his sleeves rolled up like he'd just come from saving a kitten, grinning that same toothpaste commercial smile. "All right, team," he said, clapping his hands once like a middle school PE coach. "We've got the Grayson renewal coming in hot, the Q1 roadmap locked, and holiday bonuses tied to project rollouts. That means we need all hands on deck, well, most hands." A couple chuckles. Lindsay smirked into her latte. Then Drew turned to me. "You're off the Christmas roster, Barbara," he said with the casual venom of someone who's practiced being cruel in front of a mirror. "Take some time. Recharge. You've earned a break." My pen paused mid-note. I looked up, met his eyes. The room went quiet in that sterile way that says everyone heard but no one would admit it. "Understood," I said simply. I didn't flinch, didn't ask for clarification, didn't remind him that I'd built the Christmas rollout template 5 years ago when Lindsay still thought VPN was a boy band. I just sat there, notebook open, page half-filled, and absorbed the blow like a sponge made of steel. He moved on, talking about synergy vectors and client delight. I started making a list on the bottom of the page. Deck 14th. Removed from rollout team, Deck 10th. Off holiday bonus thread, NOV 30th. Calendar purge confirmed. NOV 23rd. Audit packet sent without review, Oct 18th. Drew updated org chart, removed my name from Grayson lead. The pattern wasn't a coincidence. It was a phase-out. And I'd seen one before, just not from someone dumb enough to do it during a $50 million renewal with a client who required my literal, non-negotiable signature. After the meeting, Lindsay brushed past me in the hallway with a wink and a whispered, "Enjoy the holidays," like I was some school secretary being handed early retirement and a scented candle. Back at my desk, I opened the HR portal. PTO request, December 1923. Reason, personal. I clicked submit, then closed my laptop with the kind of finality you usually reserve for a coffin lid. No one asked why. No one even acknowledged it. The next few days were full of final pushes and alignment check-ins, none of which included me. I started getting email threads forwarded by mistake. Subject lines like Grayson Deck Final 2. PPTX with body text that made it clear nobody had read the contract. They were planning for Lindsay to sign on our end. Clause 11.2. Strategic renewals over $10M must be signed by the original account custodian, Barbara K. Fulton, unless 90 days notice and client countersignature are provided in writing. I helped write that clause after the vendor gate disaster in 2015. Joel from Grayson insisted on it, because trust wasn't just verbal, it was procedural. They'd erased me from the holiday playlist, but forgot I was still the damn DJ. That weekend, I took my work phone and powered it off. The office had become a parody of itself, Drew strutting around like a budget Musk, Lindsay tweeting inspirational quotes about leadership while failing to notice that her own presentation decks had typos in the footers. I spent Sunday evening in my sunroom, tea in hand, watching the first snow dust the tops of the hedges. My cat Minerva purred against my leg. I opened a drawer and pulled out a hard copy of the Grayson contract. Page 37, Clause 11.2. I underlined it in red Sharpie. Then I drafted an email to myself titled, Contingency Plan Execution Ready. The subject line of the original Grayson proposal still sat in my archive. Trust is a signature, not a speech. They would learn that. Soon. The snow was still melting off the Kepler-Moss front steps when the Grayson defense delegation arrived, 4 of them, in tailored coats and blunt expressions that said, let's skip the warm-up. They weren't the kind of client who smiled at icebreaker slides or accepted sparkling water instead of coffee. They had mission-critical contracts, deliverables wrapped in federal compliance, and zero tolerance for bullshit. At 9 a.m. sharp, they were ushered into the executive boardroom, where Drew had rearranged the chairs to create what he smugly called a collaborative horseshoe. Lindsay stood near the whiteboard with a marker. Dylan sat next to a stack of printouts he didn't understand, and Drew was bouncing on his heels like a man about to host a TED talk that nobody asked for. Welcome, welcome. He beamed as Joel Mendez, Grayson's lead negotiator, stepped in and placed a thick leather-bound folder on the table. Joel didn't shake hands, didn't smile, just nodded. We're here for the signing, he said. Final version is as discussed. All that's left is execution. Drew nodded so hard I thought his neck might snap. Absolutely. Seamless process. Lindsay's prepared the decks for the upcoming rollout. Dylan will walk you through updates since Q3, and we'll have your files notarized and returned by close of day. Joel opened the folder, slow and deliberate. The contract was printed on secure watermark paper, pages dog-eared from review. He flipped to the back, stopped, and slid the document across the polished oak table. Signature line was pre-printed in bold, black serif font. Barbara K. Fulton, strategic account custodian. Joel's eyes lifted, calm but direct. Where's Barbara? Drew blinked. Barbara's currently on personal leave, but I'll be handling the sign-off on her behalf. Everything's in order. Joel didn't move the folder. Clause 11.2 states the signer must be the original account custodian. That's Barbara. Lindsay jumped in, voice sugar-coated and useless. We've made some internal leadership updates. Drew's now heading strategic accounts, and Barbara's role has shifted more into advisory capacity. But of course, our quality remains top tier. Joel closed the folder, still calm. I didn't ask about your org chart. I asked where Barbara is. Because unless she's dead or in witness protection, we need her signature. Dylan tried to recover with a joke, something about resurrecting Barbara by EOD. But the silence that followed was terminal. Joel glanced at the younger man like he was a mosquito that had just interrupted a funeral. Drew cleared his throat, tapping his tablet with fingers that now twitched at the edges. We've spoken with legal and believe we can. Joel cut him off. You believe incorrectly. We drafted Clause 11.2 after your 2015 mishap, when the vendor you appointed breached protocol and exposed classified timelines. Barbara negotiated that clause, at our request. No Barbara, no contract. I imagine it was around that moment that Drew began to truly sweat. Not performance sweat, not pitch sweat, collapse sweat. The kind that soaks through a button down and stains the truth into your armpits. Lindsay looked like she wanted to evaporate into her pastel blazer. Drew scrambled. I'll get her on the phone. We can fast-track a remote signature. DocuSign, maybe, no, Joel said flatly. Clause 11.2b requires in-person signature or a notarized wet copy delivered by the original custodian. And it must be done today. He stood. We'll be at the Union Hotel across the street. You have until 5 p.m. to produce Barbara Fulton with a pen in her hand. He didn't wait for response. The other 3 Grayson reps stood and followed him out, leaving behind the open contract, the untouched coffee, and the remains of Drew's illusion of control. Back in the boardroom, silence stretched like a bad omen. Then Lindsay muttered, "Does anyone have her number?" Drew didn't respond. He just stared at the name on the contract like it had personally betrayed him. Barbara K. Fulton. Turns out when you spend weeks erasing someone from the roster, you should double-check whose name is printed in permanent ink. Back at Kepler-Moss HQ, the calm that had cloaked the office like corporate wallpaper cracked like a dropped wineglass. The moment the Grayson team walked out, Drew exploded into movement, slapping his tablet on the table and barking into Slack like it owed him child support. Legal was summoned within 5 minutes. 4 of them showed up, still clutching bagels, confused as hell and already defensive. Okay, said Mandy from compliance, dragging her laptop cable behind her like a leash. Clause 11.2 is a named signatory clause. It's not ambiguous. If Barbara doesn't sign this in person or wet ink with a notary, Grayson can walk. Full stop. Drew's eye twitched. What if someone else signs and we backdate it? We could have Lindsay or Dylan. Nope. Mandy didn't even look up. It has to be Barbara. And Grayson knows it. They wrote the clause. I've got the revision history in the red lines to prove it. Lindsay, now 5 shades of panic under her bronzer, piped up. But I mean, we're the ones doing the work now, right? Can't we just sign and tell them Barbara approved it informally? Mandy didn't bother hiding her eye roll. Yeah, and then we can roll up the contract into a paper airplane and throw it out the window. It won't hold. Drew pinched the bridge of his nose. Call her. I've already pinged her, Lindsay said, staring at her phone like it owed her an apology. 3 texts, all marked as read. No reply. She's ghosting us? Dylan asked, his voice cracking. What if she left? She submitted PTO, Mandy said flatly. Legally, we can't compel her to do jack. Meanwhile, at 9:43 a.m., I was in my sunroom with a second cup of Darjeeling and a cat on my lap. My phone vibrated once then again. I flipped its screen down on the table and kept reading. I'd started The Art of War again, felt appropriate. Drew tried calling next. I didn't answer. They sent an email, urgent, signature request please advise ASAP. I marked it unread and took another sip of tea. Then legal tried a Hail Mary. They pulled in an intern from contracts, Zoe, sweet girl, smart, 3 months into the job and still thinking she could change the world with a well-formatted spreadsheet. Lindsay handed her the pen and said, you'll be acting as proxy signer. We'll say Barbara authorized it before PTO. Zoe looked terrified. Is that legal? Gray area, Drew said. Just sign it. The signed copy was couriered across the street in a blue folder with a handwritten note that read, per verbal approval from Barbara Fulton, signature enclosed. 30 minutes later, the folder came back, untouched. A single yellow post-it on the cover in sharp, lawyerly print, clause 11.2, must be signed by original account custodian. Verbal equals void. Joel, that's all it said. At 11:15 a.m., Drew stormed into legal again. Sweating through his shirt, we have to fix this. Get Grayson's legal on the phone. Offer them an override, a notarized affidavit, something. Mandy looked up from her laptop with the weariness of someone who's seen 3 reorgs and survived a hostile merger. What you need is Barbara, not a workaround, not a loophole, not a notary. You need Barbara Fulton with a pen in this building by 5 p.m. Lindsay slumped into a chair, mascara smudged at the corners. She's doing this on purpose. Drew snapped, she's punishing us. They were right. I wasn't punishing them by accident. I was giving them exactly what they asked for: silence, absence, elevation. I ignored 2 more calls. A Slack DM popped up from Dylan. Hey Barbara, hope you're well. Smiling face with smiling eyes. Quick cue, any chance you could swing by HQ today? Folded hands, I closed the app. Then came the desperate reach outs, a flower delivery, cheap tulips. Uber Eats order with a note. We're sorry. Please sign. It was a Cobb salad, no dressing. Passive aggression in raw main form. I opened a blank sticky note on my desktop and typed. 3 texts, 2 calls, 1 forged signature, 1 Cobb salad, still no accountability by 2 p.m. The team had split into chaos cells. Drew was pacing like a man negotiating a hostage situation where he was the hostage. Lindsay was refreshing her phone every 5 seconds, as if sheer willpower could conjure my reply. Legal had given up and was now watching the clock like it was a countdown to execution. And I opened a tin of shortbread cookies, the kind that actually taste like butter, and put on a lo-fi jazz playlist. Minerva curled up in my lap again. I was at peace, because they hadn't just underestimated me. They'd bet everything on forgetting me. By 3:07 p.m., the boardroom at Kepler Moss had begun to take on the scent of doom, an odd mix of stale coffee, nervous sweat, and paper being flipped too fast by people trying to read what they should have already known. Drew had summoned what he called an all-leads critical alignment, code for someone screwed up, and I'm trying to make it not be me. The CEO was there. That alone said everything. Cameron Moss hadn't been seen outside of investor calls or golf charity galas in 6 months, and now here he was, perched at the head of the table like a disappointed dad called in to fix a group project gone nuclear. He looked crisp in a dark suit, silver cufflinks shaped like dollar signs, and the hollow eyes of a man who just learned his niece might have detonated a $50 million relationship before Q4 bonuses. Explain, he said. Drew jumped in with his usual circus of buzzwords. We've had an unexpected delay in the Grayson finalization due to signatory logistics. We're executing rapid alternatives and exploring authorized proxies within strategic compliance thresholds. Mandy from legal didn't even blink. Translation: Barbara Fulton is on PTO. We forged a workaround. Grayson caught it. They're rejecting any substitute. Cameron's eyes narrowed, so she's refusing to sign. No, Mandy replied, calm as a priest delivering last rites. She's just not here. And per clause 11.2, she's the only one allowed to sign. She tapped her laptop, turned it toward the room, and read, no authorized signer may be substituted for the strategic account custodian without 90-day written notice to Grayson defense and written countersignature from said client. Failure to comply invalidates any executed contract. Silence fell like a guillotine. You could hear the HVAC hum. Then Cameron, in a voice as flat as a canceled check, said, how the hell did no one catch this? Drew's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again like a fish gasping for credibility. We assumed, we thought. Don't tell me what you thought, Cameron snapped. Tell me how we're going to prevent our longest-standing client from walking out that door. Today, Lindsay, who looked like she hadn't blinked since breakfast, offered we could incentivize Barbara to return early. Maybe frame it as a team appreciation moment, a soft approach. Drew looked like he might cry. We sent her food. Mandy barked a laugh. You sent her salad. The woman who used to keep bourbon in a Rafflu bottle. Cameron turned slowly toward Drew. You removed her from the project roster? I streamlined our structure for agility. Cut out the one person whose name is on the damn contract. Cameron rubbed his temples like he could massage the stupidity out of the room. Then, as if on cue, Drew's phone buzzed. He looked down. Paled. It's Joel, he said. Grayson's lead. He's asking if the board is prepared to void the renewal and renegotiate through Rinaldi and Stokes. Mandy sat straighter. They're talking to Rinaldi? That's our competitor. That's death. Lindsay made a soft noise, part whimper, part disbelief. We're going to lose the account. Cameron exhaled slowly, like trying to release a demon through his nostrils. Get Barbara, pay her, beg her. I don't care if you have to send a limousine, a mariachi band, and a handwritten apology dipped in gold. Fix it. Meanwhile, at 3:13 p.m., I was folding laundry. The lo-fi jazz had shifted into light piano. I paused to pick a piece of lint from Minerva's tail and sipped my third cup of tea. My phone buzzed again. Sixth time today, Drew this time. Barbara, please, we need to talk. Urgent, I was out of line. Let's fix this together. I marked it unread and continued folding. He could talk to my PTO policy. It was stapled to the wall calendar above my desk. They wanted me back, they could write a new clause, and this time it'd be mine. The first voicemail came at 6:47 p.m. on day one. Drew, trying to sound calm, professional, collaborative. He started with, Hey Barbara, just wanted to circle back, see if we can align and maybe, and then trailed off into a panic-stifled ramble about shared priorities and mutual outcomes. I deleted it without listening to the last 10 seconds. The second one came at 7:12 p.m. It was Dylan. He tried to joke his way through it. Hey B, quick cue, any chance you're near a pen and a fax machine? Haha, just kidding, unless you're not. I let it play all the way through, then added his number to do not disturb. By 9:00 p.m., there were 7 voicemails in total, 2 from Drew, 1 from Lindsay, 3 from legal, and 1 mystery message that was just 15 seconds of silence followed by a very soft, very pitiful, please day 2 started early. At 7:03 a.m., a call from a blocked number. I let it go to voicemail. Drew again. This time the comm had cracked. His voice was sharp. Urgent, Barbara, we're facing serious exposure here. I need you to be a team player. You don't want to be the reason this implodes. I made eggs, took a long shower. Did yoga for the first time in 6 months. When I checked again at 10:22 a.m., there were 14 voicemails. By noon, 21, all caps, misspelled texts, Slack messages from people I hadn't heard from in years. Even the VP of Finance reached out, asking if I had just 5 minutes for a quick bridge call. Lindsay's voicemail came around 3:00 p.m., and it was a masterpiece of chaos. At first, she tried the sweet voice like we were old friends reconnecting. Barbs, I just want to say I'm so sorry if there were mixed signals about your role. You are so valued and we just need your light right now. Then the tears started. Actual tears. I'm gonna lose this account. My uncle is going to kill me. He trusted me to run this right and Drew said you'd just sign. He promised. She kept talking, voice breaking in waves until the voicemail cut off at 2 minutes. I didn't respond. I did, however, draft a reply, not to send, just to get the words right. I'm not your light. I was the generator you unplugged and forgot to thank, and now the whole building's dark. At 5:12 p.m., a blocked number again. I let it ring once, and twice. Then I answered, Barbara? Drew's voice sounded like it had aged 10 years and 24 hours. I'm enjoying the quiet, I said, sipping tea on the porch, wrapped in a fleece blanket, the cat curled at my feet. No Slack, no pinging, no meetings full of children trying to rename things they don't understand. He exhaled, audibly relieved that I hadn't hung up. Listen, he said, we need you. I know I made some miscalculations. That's an elegant word for screwed up. He swallowed. I could hear it. I'm asking formally for you to return today, just for the signing. I let the silence drag long and cold. Then I said I'll consider a return on terms. What kind of terms? Triple my hourly. 1 week independent consulting contract. No emails. You send a courier with documents and a written apology. He laughed, nervous, like he thought I was joking. I'm not kidding, I said flatly. Apology must be signed by you, Lindsay, and Cameron. You'll hand-deliver it with the check. Barbara, this is extortion. No, I replied. This is how adults fix mistakes. You cut me out to prove a point. Now I'm the point. He was quiet. Then, okay, I'll draft something. Make sure the paper is thick. The kind that feels expensive between your fingers. He laughed again, this time without humor. Is that all? One more thing, I added. Lindsay's not allowed within 10 feet of me. Ever again. Understood, I hung up. Minerva blinked up at me like she knew something was ending. Control had shifted. The tide was in. And I was already building the terms of my return like a queen laying siege with ink instead of blood. 2 days later, I walked through the glass doors of Kepler Moss not as an employee, but as a contractor. No badge, no desk, no HR orientation. Just a manila folder in my hand, and the weight of 17 years lifted off my shoulders like a winter coat I didn't plan to wear again. My name was no longer in the org chart, but it didn't matter because now it was on the invoice. Triple my former hourly rate, 1 week engagement. Purpose, contractual signature authorization. That's what the consulting agreement said. I made sure legal printed it on thick linen cardstock, the kind you use for weddings and lawsuits. A receptionist I didn't recognize tried to hand me a visitor's badge. I waved it off. I'm only here for one signature, I said, mine. The exec floor looked smaller now, like the ceiling had dropped. The fake modern art on the walls felt even faker. I walked through the halls like a ghost in reverse, once invisible, now undeniable. Eyes followed me from every glass-walled conference room. Slack probably lit up like a Christmas tree. At the front desk of legal, a courier envelope waited for me. Inside, the apology letter, typed, centered, signed at the bottom in blue ink. We, the undersigned, formally acknowledge the critical contributions of Barbara K. Fulton to the Grayson defense account and recognize her exclusive authority, as defined in Clause 11.2, to execute this renewal. Without her, this firm would not have retained its most long-standing strategic client. Signed, Cameron Moss CEO, Drew Thompson VP Strategic Accounts, Lindsay Ross Director. Brand strategy. Lindsay's signature was a jagged squiggle, like the pen had resisted. I folded the letter once cleanly and slid it into my coat pocket. Drew appeared just as I rounded the corner toward the executive suite. Barbara, he said, breathless, like he jogged through the building rehearsing his lines. I wanted to say, I know an apology doesn't cover everything, but I truly didn't realize how. I walked past him. No pause, no nod, not even eye contact. Apologies are nice, but written ones are billable. At the door to the boardroom, Mandy from legal greeted me with a smile I hadn't seen in years. Grayson's waiting. Joel brought the original copy. They want your pen. Do they have coffee? Hot, black. No foam art. Perfect. Inside the boardroom, Joel stood at the window, hands clasped behind his back. When he turned, he smiled, a real one. Barbara, you look well. I feel expensive, I replied. He laughed, then slid the folder across the table. The contract was open to the signature page. My name still pre-printed, bold as ever. I picked up the pen, signed with one deliberate stroke. Joel nodded, on behalf of Grayson Defense. Thank you for maintaining continuity when others tried to rewrite it. I don't maintain continuity, I said, standing. I am the continuity. The room didn't applaud, they didn't have to. Vindication doesn't need a standing ovation. It needs a signature and a check that clears. As I left the building, a junior analyst whispered to a colleague, "Is that Barbara?" The other replied, "She's the one who saved the Grayson account." Wrong tense. I was the one. Now I was something else entirely. And for the first time in years, I didn't belong to that building, I built it. 2 days later, they held a formal signing ceremony in the executive boardroom, one of those sterile corporate rituals where everyone dresses up like a bigger version of their LinkedIn photo and pretends PowerPoint slides are sacred scripture. Grayson Defense was there in full. Joel, their general counsel, 2 new faces from procurement, even a government liaison in a gray suit with a lapel pin that screamed classified clearance and zero humor. The Kepler Moss execs looked like they'd just crawled out of a PR crisis. Cameron Moss had traded his usual swagger for rigid politeness. Drew wore a new shirt that still had a fold crease down the sleeve. Lindsay was there too, slouched behind her branded MacBook, trying to look engaged while visibly swallowing regret like bad cough syrup. I entered at exactly 9 a.m. Coat folded over one arm, folder in hand. No fanfare, no smile, just the sound of my heels on the tile like a metronome of inevitability. Joel nodded. "Shall we?" I sat down. The contract was already laid out, warm from the copier. The signature block hadn't changed. Same name, same clause, my name still printed in all caps like a warning label. I signed. One clean stroke. Silence followed. Not out of confusion, but reverence. The deal was done. Kepler Moss had just been saved from its own stupidity, and everyone in the room knew it. I reached into my folder and pulled out 5 holiday cards, thick stock, deep red, gold trim. Grayson's logo embossed on the front. Inside, each was handwritten in pen to continuity. To remembering who built the bridge before you try to walk across it. Barbara, I passed them across the table. Joel smiled again, tucked his card into his briefcase like it was a national security artifact. Then I stood. Cameron rose quickly, clearly eager to shift the tone. "Barbara, if I may, on behalf of the entire leadership team, I just want to say," I held up one hand. "You said I was off the roster," I said, voice steady, clear. "You were right." A pause. I glanced around the room once more. At Drew, now staring at his phone like it could erase the past. At Lindsay, who wouldn't meet my eyes. I just made my own. I turned and walked out. No applause, no standing ovation. Just the quiet understanding that something had ended and something far more permanent had been written in its place. As I passed the receptionist, she asked, "Should I validate your parking?" "No need," I said. "They're paying for the whole damn lot now." Outside, the wind was sharp, clean. I pulled on my coat, slid the apology letter deeper into my inner pocket, and walked down the street like a woman no longer tethered to anyone else's table. They can keep the roster. I own the contract. Big thanks for watching, you sneaky seniors. Subscribe to keep the coffee pot brewing revenge. Your ex-colleagues won't know what hit him. I knew something was off when I saw my name printed on the new org chart, smaller, lighter, and shoved down near the bottom like someone had whispered it instead of typed it. 14 years in this company, And suddenly I was an available resource, which I'm pretty sure is corporate for don't talk unless spoken to. The cherry on top, the resource I was now supposed to support was my intern, Dylan. Sweet kid. Still called a PDF a PD thingy in meetings. He meant well, but the last time I left him in charge of anything, he color-coded a spreadsheet by astrological sign. And yet there he was, standing in front of the team Monday morning, nervously adjusting his tie while the CEO's niece, Kelsey, clapped like she'd just crowned the next American Idol. Let's give a round of applause for Dylan, our new project lead for the Horizon rollout. She beamed, making eye contact with me like it was a joke we were sharing. Except I wasn't in on the joke. I was the punchline. The Horizon rollout was a $50 million nightmare in a box, 10 vendors, 3 continents, regulatory compliance in 2 time zones, and a legacy system duct taped together by a guy who once left mid-sprint to join a commune in Nevada. It was a minefield that required someone who understood the history, the politics, and the people. Someone like me. Instead, I handed it to a 24-year-old who once emailed a client a gif of a raccoon eating spaghetti to lighten the mood. And look, I'm not bitter. Not in the way people mean when they are bitter. I've been passed over before. Promotions go to people who shout in meetings, not the ones cleaning up the mess afterward. I'm the one who stays late without logging hours, who brings in muffins when morale is low, who remembers which project manager has a peanut allergy and keeps the break room safe. I don't scream for attention, I earn respect slowly, like coffee stains on a desk that prove you've been there long enough to matter. But this time it wasn't just about me. It was about the client, the team, the rollout. And the way Kelsey smirked when she said, "Sarah, you'll be an excellent support resource for Dylan," like I was a teaching aid for a gifted toddler, told me everything I needed to know. Now, before I go deeper into the circus of a story, can I ask one tiny favor? If you're listening and haven't hit the subscribe button yet, go ahead and tap it. And maybe a like too, it helps more than you think. Keeps this little operation of storytelling, caffeine, and low-level rage running smoothly. Seriously, it means the world. Anyway, back to the smirk. Kelsey had been with the company for maybe 3 weeks at that point, freshly minted as Director of Strategic Uplift, which is the kind of title you give someone when you need them to feel important, but don't trust them to own a stapler. She wore blazers like armor, carried a tablet she never used, and talked in phrases like leverage the momentum of synergy and inject disruptive energy into stagnant frameworks, which I think translates to I Googled leadership. She was all flash. Came in with a marketing degree, an Instagram following, and a firm belief that every meeting should start with a meditation exercise. Meanwhile, I'd been keeping the lights on with duct tape, caffeine, and brute competence. When the last director left mid-quarter, I handled her exit, transitioned her staff, and kept the client from walking, all without being asked. I thought maybe, just maybe, I'd finally get a shot. Instead, I got a niece with a vision board and a LinkedIn bio that included the phrase badass changemaker. But fine, let her play CEO Barbie. Let her give a PowerPoint while the rest of us build the stage out of splinters and unpaid overtime. I could survive this. I could even help Dylan, poor thing looked like a deer trying to parallel park. What I couldn't do was pretend this wasn't a disaster waiting to happen. You don't give someone keys to a $50 million machine and hope they'll figure out the clutch on the way down the highway. The worst part? Dylan knew it too. I caught him looking at me during that kickoff meeting, eyes wide and a little lost, like he was silently begging me not to vanish. I didn't smile. I didn't nod. I just looked down at my notes, flipped to a blank page, and wrote one word, document. Because if there's one thing I've learned in 14 years of corporate survival, it's this: no one wants to hear the quiet woman complain. But if she brings the receipts when the fire starts, they'll listen real fast. I tried going through the front door, the polite way. I walked into HR, closed the door, and sat down across from Janine, who's been hiding behind a faux leather desk blotter and the scent of cucumber melon lotion since the Bush administration. I laid it out plain. Look, I'm not questioning the company's direction, but Kelsey just appointed someone with 6 months of internship experience to lead the largest rollout we've ever attempted. That's not just bold, that's negligent. Janine didn't look up, just kept clicking her pen like it was a detonator. Sarah, I hear you, but this came from above. Kelsey has the CEO's confidence. Ah, that phrase, the corporate version of you're on your own, sweetheart. Translation, don't touch this unless you want your career to vanish like leftover shrimp in the break room fridge. I tried again, softer this time. I'm not trying to make this about me. I just want to make sure we're protecting the client relationship. She finally looked at me, pity in her eyes, just support the new structure. You're valued, Sarah. You're still part of the team. Valued. Like a decorative vase no one wants to break, but no one actually uses. I left without another word. No point fighting with a ghost. That afternoon, I saw Dylan in the hallway outside the conference room, staring at his own name on the meeting schedule like it was in Sanskrit. I offered him a coffee. He looked like he hadn't slept in 3 days. They want me to present the infrastructure timeline next week, he said, voice low. I don't even know where the vendor contracts are stored. I gave him a long look. He wasn't arrogant. just scared, and aware at least a little of how far above his pay grade this all was. You'll figure it out, I said. Just remember to breathe. He hesitated, then asked, do you think I'm the right person for this? That was the first time I felt it, not anger, not yet, but something sour curling in the pit of my stomach, because I knew Dylan didn't do this. He didn't campaign, didn't politic. He was the prop, the mascot, the smokescreen, and he knew it. But he was also going along with it, and that was its own kind of betrayal. Later that day, Kelsey held a staff alignment session, which is rich, considering she couldn't align her calendar invites with Eastern Time. She stood at the front of the room like she was about to deliver a TED talk no one asked for, and said, we're rethinking leadership. No more hierarchy for hierarchy's sake. Fresh ideas matter more than old hands. The room went quiet. My ears burned. And I swear to God, someone in the back coughed the word ouch. She looked directly at me after that, smiled like a cat who just peed in your shoes. Sarah, I know you'll be a steady rock of support through this transition. Steady rock. I've been called many things in this office. Gatekeeper, glue, even corporate mom by a client once who then tried to expense an edible arrangement to my birthday. But never a rock the way Kelsey said it, like I was furniture with a pulse. So I stopped talking. I stopped asking. And I started documenting. Every Slack thread, every project discrepancy, every missed vendor deadline, every time Dylan scheduled a meeting and forgot to include the tech lead. I copied key emails to my personal notes folder. Nothing illegal, just good hygiene. I created a shadow timeline, mapping out the real progress against the fantasy one Kelsey was feeding the board. Because I knew where this train was headed. Only thing I didn't know was how many bodies it would hit on the way. I also started watching Dylan more closely. He was trying, bless him. But it was like watching someone juggle chainsaws while learning what scope creep meant. He kept bumping into roadblocks and emailing me for clarification, not overtly, just little questions with polite subject lines like quick check-in or small favor. I answered them. I didn't want the thing to crash, not because I owed Kelsey anything, but because the client didn't deserve the fallout. By the end of that week, I realized something. I wasn't buried, not really. I was being planted. Kelsey thought she'd boxed me out. Moved the pieces, declared checkmate. But she forgot one thing: quiet doesn't mean blind. I could see the cracks forming already. And when this whole thing started to shake, I'd be ready, not to gloat, not to say I told you so, just to do what I've always done, pick up the pieces, and make damn sure everyone remembers who actually knew how to hold the thing together. By the end of week 3, the project dashboard looked like someone had dipped it in glitter and lied about the smell. According to Kelsey's status report, Horizon was progressing ahead of targets and achieving early synergies in cross-functional verticals, which is a lot of syllables to say we haven't crashed yet. On paper, everything was perfect. Too perfect. So perfect it felt laminated, but I've been around long enough to know how fake polish smells, and this reeked. The first red flag hit me on a Tuesday when I pulled up the finance tracker to check a vendor invoice that hadn't come through. A familiar name had been listed twice, once under consulting services and once under integration alignment. Same company, same date, 2 different line items, and somehow the hours logged exceeded the actual hours in the day, which was impressive if you ignore the laws of physics. I pinged accounts, they hadn't noticed. We just process what they send, the analyst shrugged. Then came the milestone chart. Somehow Dylan's team had logged 2 weeks of backend schema redesign in 4 business days. I checked the commits. Most of them were shell placeholders, blank files with names like TBDV1 and notes later. Not a single test case, no documentation, just digital tumbleweeds. It wasn't fraud, not exactly. It was delusion, polished and presented like innovation. One night that week, Wednesday, I think, I stayed late to finish my own client report for another team. Everyone else had gone home, but I heard footsteps in the hallway, then a low muttering that could only belong to someone losing a fight with Microsoft Excel. I walked over. Dylan was hunched in a conference room, sleeves rolled up, tie discarded, and 3 empty Red Bulls orbiting his laptop like sad little moons. He looked up. Oh, Sarah, hey, didn't know anyone was still here. I stepped inside. Midnight Oil, he ran a hand through his hair. They need a working prototype for the early demo Friday. The API's not stable. The integration sandbox is down. And I just realized I scheduled the client walkthrough the same day as the mock security audit. Rookie move, I said, not unkindly. I don't know what I'm doing, he admitted, quiet, like a kid confessing to cheating on a test and hoping for mercy. I leaned against the glass wall. Okay, first cut the walkthrough, say it's rescheduled due to a pending security review. Sounds official, makes you look proactive, not panicked. He blinked. That's good. Second, show them the live build, run a click-through simulation. Screenshots stitched together in a slideshow. Looks real, buys time. He typed as I spoke, nodding fast. Third, I added, run a fake latency test tonight. Post the results first thing in the morning. Say you're benchmarking performance against load. They'll think you're ahead of the curve. He looked up, eyes wide. How do you know this stuff? I didn't answer. Just pushed off the wall and walked out with a soft, get some sleep. Dylan, you look like you've been surviving on fear and vending machine peanuts. Behind me, I heard him whisper, thank you. And I hated how much that stirred something in me, because I wanted to be mad. Still did, but I couldn't watch him drown. The next morning, the demo went fine. The client was impressed by the interface flow. Kelsey took selfies in front of the conference room and posted a LinkedIn update about youth-led innovation in legacy spaces. Dylan said nothing, just looked at me across the hallway like a soldier who made it through basic training because someone slipped him a map. That night, I started a new file in my backup drive. Coaching logs, not to throw him under the bus, not to cover my ass, just in case. If things went bad, someone needed to know the truth. I was becoming a ghost in my own office, unseen, unheard, but quietly moving things into place. I wasn't in the spotlight. Kelsey had made sure of that. The pieces were shifting, and I was the only one who knew how brittle the whole damn structure was. I didn't need credit. I needed the project not to implode. But part of me, just a small, sharp part, also wanted the reckoning. The moment where the house of cards would wobble and someone would ask, how the hell did this stay standing? And I'd be able to say, because I held it. He started showing up at my desk around 7:15 a.m., just before the floor filled with the sound of forced laughter and burnt coffee. Always the same greeting, quick question, followed by a sheepish look that said it was anything but quick, and always with that same folder tucked under his arm, like it might bite if he held it wrong. I didn't tell him to stop. I didn't tell anyone he was coming, either. It became a quiet little rhythm, Dylan dropping by with fresh panic in his eyes, he untangling his messes like old Christmas lights. No praise, no performance reviews, just clean execution and a handful of sticky notes that slowly morphed into entire contingency frameworks. He'd leave my desk with a plan. I'd watch him go with a sigh. The funny part, he was learning, fast, not perfect, not polished, but you could see the gears turning now. The way he handled status updates improved. He stopped overpromising. He started asking the right questions, not just what should I do, but what's the fallout if I don't? That kind of thinking doesn't come from management webinars. It comes from survival. Meanwhile, Kelsey had transformed into a one-woman PR tour. One morning, I saw her being filmed in the lobby by our social media intern, delivering a monologue about elevating underrepresented perspectives in leadership pipelines. I think she meant Dylan, or herself, or maybe the ficus. She strutted through the office like she was scouting locations for a reality show. She'd forward Dylan's heavily edited progress updates to the board with subject lines like next-gen leadership, at work flexed biceps, and proof that bold bets equals big returns. At one point, she even emailed a client to introduce herself as the key strategic visionary behind Horizon's transformation timeline. Visionary. The only vision she had was for ring lights and vertical video. But I didn't correct her, didn't reply all. I just kept doing what I do best, keeping the wheels from flying off. At night, I'd open my coaching logs, notes from our morning talks, snapshots of the dashboards I'd updated on his behalf, screenshots of the Slack threads where I ghostwrote his responses to stakeholder concerns. Not to weaponize, not yet, but in case the avalanche started. I wanted to make sure no one mistook the snowflakes for leadership. One afternoon, Dylan came to me looking pale. I just got looped into a partner call with the West Coast integration team, he said. They asked for the API audit logs from the last rollout. I don't even know where those live. I didn't blink. They don't live anywhere yet. They were never generated. What do? You're going to tell them you're working on a zero-trust compliance model and need 48 hours to reprocess the logs to match the new schema. Then we're going to actually make the logs. Tonight. He nodded, taking it down like scripture. Later that week, Kelsey posted a company-wide update that started with, "Every great leader knows when to step aside and let the new guard shine." I'm thrilled to see Dylan trailblazing new paths with such confidence. That was the day I started backing up the entire Horizon folder onto an encrypted drive. Not because I didn't trust the system, because I did. The system protected people like Kelsey, loud, shiny, and full of executive lingo. People who could crash a company in heels and still get a LinkedIn endorsement for thought leadership. I knew how this could end. Best case, the project limped across the finish line and Kelsey took the credit. Worst case, it exploded. Dylan became the scapegoat, and I'd be the ghost they forgot to blame, the resource, the rock. But every day, Dylan got sharper. Not because of Kelsey's mentorship, she hadn't had a real conversation with him in 2 weeks, but because he kept coming back, kept asking, kept absorbing. He'd still stumble sometimes, but now he caught himself. And every time he did, I felt this strange thing rise in me, not pride exactly, but something older, something deeper, like watching a stray cat figure out how a screen door works. Still, I never smiled when he got it right. Never said good job, that wasn't the deal. This wasn't mothering, this was triage. The fire hadn't started yet, but I could smell the smoke in the wiring, and I was the only one reaching for the extinguisher. The moment she said it, we're currently tracking 6 weeks ahead of schedule, you could feel the boardroom exhale like it had just finished a spa day in Maui. Applause erupted. One of the VPs actually muttered impressive under his breath like he'd just watched someone build a rocket out of popsicle sticks. I stood against the wall near the coffee cart, paper cup in hand, wondering if anyone else noticed that the ship they were clapping for had a hole the size of an SUV in its hull. Dylan didn't clap, didn't smile. He just stared at his shoes, left foot twitching like it wanted to leave the room without him. Kelsey beamed, flipping to a slide with graphs so smooth and upward trending, they may as well have been pulled from a Wall Street stock fantasy. We've completely restructured our backend processing, she said, clicking through a bullet point that referenced streamlined architecture improvements she wouldn't recognize if they fell on her manicure. Every data point on that screen was technically true, but contextually hollow. Delays hadn't happened yet, but they would. The foundation wasn't finished. The testing hadn't started, and the QA team was still working off outdated documentation Dylan didn't know he was supposed to update. But the real killer? The promise. 6 weeks ahead meant one thing in that room, a faster launch, which meant client expectations would shift. Contractual obligations would tighten. Budgets would be locked. There wouldn't be room to fix anything once things cracked open, because now, thanks to Kelsey's little TED talk, everyone thought it was already done. I watched her finish with a flourish about youth-driven execution velocity, and then I did what I always do. I opened Outlook, composed a new email. Subject line, urgent, load testing, body we need to talk, tonight, no delays, bring whatever numbers you have, even if they are ugly. I hit send before I could overthink it. Across the room, I saw Dylan flinch when his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, then looked up at me with this quiet look of thank God, and oh no braided together like a noose made of caution tape. After the meeting, I didn't stick around for the catered wrap sandwiches or the obligatory small talk about quarterly outlooks. I walked straight to the elevator and rode it alone, my reflection looking back at me in the brushed metal wall, tired, sharp-eyed, and one step ahead of the collapse, because now there was a clock ticking. They wanted a launch date. They wanted a press release. And somewhere between the fake velocity metrics and Kelsey's red lipstick lies, the Horizon project had gone from salvageable to sacrificial. I called Dylan that evening. No pleasantries. Have you run any load tests? I ran one last week, but the response times were all over the place. I didn't include them in the report. Of course you didn't, I said. That would have made you honest, and honesty would have made you unemployed. Silence. Listen, I continued, we're going to run 3 full scenarios tonight, not the pretty ones. The ones that break things. You'll present sanitized results tomorrow, enough to buy us breathing room. But the board thinks we're ahead. They think a Barbie doll is steering a battleship, I snapped. Don't try to steer. Try not to hit the reef. We ran tests until nearly 1 a.m. The results were worse than I expected. Transaction failure rates spiked after 300 concurrent users. Database queries stacked like unpaid bills. Error logging wasn't even enabled in 2 key modules. Dylan took screenshots with shaking hands while I dictated a memo draft he could send to the tech leads without sounding like he was blowing a whistle. When he finally leaned back in his chair, he asked quietly, "What happens when they find out?" "They won't," I said, closing my laptop. "Not if we fix it first." And that's when I realized what I had become. Not a mentor, not a guide, a cleaner. I was the one scrubbing the blood off the marble while the executives toasted above me. And Kelsey, she was up there somewhere, sipping champagne on the deck of a ship I was bailing out with a solo cup. But the water was rising now. Fast. And when it reached her heels, I wanted to be the one standing dry on the dock, holding the damn blueprint. It started with a 2-sentence email from a client rep in Chicago. "We're seeing latency spikes in the sandbox environment. Please confirm failover readiness." I read it twice before forwarding it to Dylan. A minute later, he pinged me. "Is that bad?" "Yes, Dylan, it's bad. It's real bad when a client catches your infrastructure wheezing before you've even put it on the treadmill." I opened the admin panel and ran a health check across our integration environment. It looked like a damn haunted house, timeouts, retries stacking like Jenga blocks, and the CPU load graph doing an impression of Mount Everest. Somewhere in Oregon, one of our cloud clusters was quietly throwing up into its own cache. I checked the calendar. We were 8 business days from the soft launch. And now the cracks weren't just visible, they were screaming. Dylan called me before I could call him. "I just got off with the security team. They say our token auth is reverting to default protocols under load." "I don't even know what that means." "It means your platform is about to start treating strangers like friends," I snapped. "Did you get my packet?" "I did, but wait, is this the rollback protocol?" "I thought that was just insurance, it's your lifeline now," I said. "We're done rehearsing, go live with it." He didn't argue. Meanwhile, Kelsey had gone radio silent. Her out-of-office reply said she was traveling for client engagement dinners. Her calendar showed her booked at a resort restaurant 2 zip codes away with the tag execaline WIN/WIN ops wine glass. I stared at the screen in disbelief. The project was catching fire and she was sipping wine with buzzwords. Dylan messaged me again. "Chicago rep wants to see the stability log for Region 3. I don't have one." "You do now," I replied, dragging a file from my private archive and renaming it to look like it came from his machine. "Send this." I wasn't proud of it, but I also wasn't going to let 3 months of my quiet labor go up in smoke because someone got promoted for knowing how to hashtag. The client questions came in waves after that. Seattle wanted confirmation on encryption layers. Boston asked for real-time telemetry screenshots. Atlanta demanded to know why they were seeing sandbox bleed from a previous instance, a glitch that should have been buried 6 weeks ago. And through it all, Dylan relayed them to me like a scared kid passing notes to a substitute teacher. I didn't blame him. The project had turned into a full-blown hostage situation, and the only person with the manual was me. So I took the wheel. I compiled a crisis response packet with updated metrics, screenshots, and pre-written talking points. I rewrote our user provisioning doc in under an hour. I restructured the logging config and shipped it to Dylan with a line that read, "Deploy this by 3 p.m. and say nothing unless asked." He replied with a single word, "Done." The clients didn't relax, but they backed off for now. At 5:46 p.m., the system crashed for 12 minutes. Our status page showed degraded performance in 4 regions. Kelsey, still MIA. Dylan sent me a Slack message that just read, "What if I can't fix this?" "You don't have to," I typed. "You just have to hold the line while I do." That night, I didn't go home. I ordered Chinese food to my desk, kicked off my shoes, and worked until my screen blurred. I reconfigured load balancers, resequenced job queues, pulled audit logs, spliced code like it was rope, and I was tying it around the waist of a sinking ship. By midnight, we had stability. Not perfection, but enough to stop the bleeding. I logged off, cracked my knuckles, and stared at my own reflection in the black screen. I looked like hell, but the system was standing, and Kelsey, she'd wake up tomorrow to glowing emails she didn't earn. I wasn't coaching anymore, I wasn't even supporting. I was piloting this whole mess through a storm she never saw coming. Quietly, invisibly, but not for much longer. It was supposed to be a quiet Tuesday. Rain outside, stale bagels in the break room, and just enough silence to get through patching the regression bugs from last night's code freeze. But at 9:03 a.m., everything shattered. The front desk called up with a voice like someone had just seen a ghost. Sarah, there's a man here from Signerline Corp. Says his name is Mark Callahan. He's asking for a live walkthrough of the Horizon deployment." My mouth went dry. Signerline was one of our highest value clients, not the kind that makes polite suggestions via email, the kind that shows up in person when they smell blood in the water. "Put him in conference B," I said, already moving. I found Dylan pacing near the elevators, holding a laptop like it might explode. "He's here early," he hissed. "We weren't supposed to meet until next week." "They want answers now," I said. "Do you have the dashboards prepped?" His face told me everything. I only have the staging snapshot from last week." "Then we use mine." I pulled out my encrypted thumb drive and pointed toward Conference B. "You're going to introduce him. Smile, offer coffee, stall for 5 minutes. Then I'll join as support." But no time, Dylan, move, he went. I ducked into my office, connected to the secure backup server I'd mirrored from the night before, and preloaded a suite of real-time dashboards, system health, latency averages, deployment status, and regional uptime. Then I walked in like I belonged there because in truth I did, more than anyone else in this damn building. Mark Callahan had the look of someone who spent more time on planes than at home. Polished, direct, dangerous. "Dylan," he said, shaking hands with a stiff smile, "I hear your rollout's been eventful." Dylan stammered something about agile pivots. Mark turned to me. "And you are?" "Sarah. I support systems continuity." He nodded. "Good. Then you can show me how the East Coast cluster is handling failover latency under concurrent sessions." I slid into the seat next to him, opened the console, and pulled up the data. "This is the live environment," I said. "We've got 3 load balancers operating at 82% efficiency, failover latency sitting at 2.3 seconds. We anticipate sub-2-second latency post-middleware patch on Thursday." He squinted. "These are clean. Cleaner than I expected." "They're real," I said, letting it hang there just long enough to leave a mark. Just then, the boardroom door swung open. Kelsey entered, breathless and over-perfumed, phone still in hand. "Sorry I'm late. Traffic was a nightmare. Didn't realize we had an in-person today." Mark didn't even turn his head. "We didn't. I made the call this morning. I wanted to see what was really going on." Kelsey tried to sit at the head of the table. I watched her scan the monitors and realized this wasn't her show anymore. It hadn't been for weeks. "What are we looking at?" she asked, tone breezy and brittle. "System health under active stress," I replied before Dylan could panic. "We're mid-recalibration. Dylan's team is implementing live configuration changes for edge stability." Dylan looked at me like I'd just walked on water. Kelsey laughed too loudly. "Oh, we're always recalibrating. That's part of the plan, right?" Mark raised an eyebrow. "Interesting, that's not what your last update said. You reported that the East Coast was already fully stabilized." I saw Kelsey freeze for half a breath, then smile. "Oh, well, we wanted to project confidence. You know how it is." Mark didn't respond, just looked at me again. "So, Sarah," he said, leaning forward, "when exactly did you begin preparing these backup dashboards?" I kept my expression neutral. "About a month ago." Kelsey blinked. He nodded. "Smart." The door opened again, this time 2 board members stepped in. Apparently word had spread. Signerline didn't do pop-ins without a reason, and this room now felt like a pressure cooker with a smiley face sticker slapped on the lid. Mark stood. "I'll be honest. I wasn't expecting this level of transparency or stability." Dylan opened his mouth, then closed it. Kelsey laughed again. "Too sharp this time. That's the beauty of distributed leadership. Everyone plays a part." I didn't correct her. "Not yet." But as the room cleared and whispers followed the board members down the hall, I looked at her, really looked. She still thought she was steering the ship. but I was the one holding the rudder, and I was this close to letting everyone know. The calendar invite said urgent, Horizon Review Sea Level only, which made it all the more curious when my name appeared at the bottom of the attendee list in faint gray font with the note, Sarah Observation only. Observation, huh? I wore black, sat near the wall again like furniture. No laptop, just a slim leather folder and the tiniest smile I've ever allowed myself in that building. The boardroom was packed before the hour. Everyone buzzed with that specific corporate energy that comes when a client skips the chain of command and goes straight for the jugular. Kelsey arrived 5 minutes late, fresh blowout, gold pen in hand like she was going to autograph a book she hadn't written. Dylan was already seated, hunched, face pale. He looked like a kid who'd been caught sneaking a beer and expected prison time. The CEO entered, expression unreadable. The CTO followed, jaw clenched. Then the screen lit up, video call initiated. "This is Caroline NG," said the voice from the monitor. "COO Signerline Corp. Let's skip the pleasantries. I want to know who made the decision to greenlight a launch window with unresolved latency issues and no verified rollback protocol in place." You could hear a pin drop, and then choke on it. The CEO opened his mouth to respond, but Kelsey beat him to it. "We were under the impression all metrics were stable," she said, her voice syrupy. "Our report showed no," Caroline snapped. "I've seen the reports, and I've seen the logs that contradict them. Someone knew the system wasn't ready and patched it under the radar. That person saved this rollout. I want their name." All eyes turned to Dylan. His mouth opened, then closed. He looked at me. The CEO shifted. "Dylan, he stammered. "We made collaborative adjustments enough," Caroline said. "If the person who stabilized this is in the room, speak now, or we take this up with legal." I closed my folder, cleared my throat. "Caroline," I said, "that would be me." A beat of silence, then a murmur. I stood calmly and pulled out a printout. "This is a log of the backup architecture I began assembling 6 weeks ago. You'll see timestamps, configuration notes, and alternate deployment paths. Here's the testing matrix Dylan and I ran, off hours. Load balancing scripts, adjusted query routing, manual patches to the regional failover system." I stepped forward, placed the folder on the table. We did what we could with what we had. And what we had, frankly, was a lot of pressure, limited oversight, and a leadership vacuum. The CEO stared at me like I'd spoken in Latin. The board chair leaned in, flipping through the folder. "Why wasn't this disclosed?" someone asked. "Because the official reports claimed we were ahead of schedule," I replied, eyes on Kelsey. "And because the only way to keep things from failing publicly was to fix them privately." Kelsey laughed, thin, brittle. "Oh, come on, we all contributed to this. I mean, Dylan and I worked tirelessly too." I slid a second document across the table. Coaching logs, handwritten notes, screen captures with timestamps, Slack messages. "I mentored Dylan," I said, voice steady. "Didn't make those decisions alone. But he also didn't lie about the timeline. That credit belongs elsewhere." The boardroom grew colder. Someone at the far end said, "Wait, are you saying Dylan was put in charge without sufficient experience?" I said nothing, just looked down at the coaching logs. The CEO's gaze slowly turned toward Kelsey. "Is that true?" he asked. She looked around. No allies, no applause, just the click, click, click of a career unraveling in real time. "I was empowering new voices," she said weakly. Caroline spoke again. "I don't care about your empowerment initiative. I care that you nearly cost us a multi-million-dollar disaster and misrepresented system readiness to our shareholders." The CEO pinched the bridge of his nose. "Sarah, why didn't you come forward sooner?" "I wasn't invited," I said simply. "Just observed." The boardroom was dead silent as I gathered my things. No one told me to stay. No one told me to sit back down. I walked out without looking over my shoulder, though I could feel every eye tracking me to the door. And Kelsey? Kelsey looked like a candle someone had just blown out. The boardroom door stayed closed behind me for 7 minutes and 42 seconds. I know because I watched the wall clock across the hallway tick each second like a heartbeat, steady and cruel. Through the glass, I could see blurry outlines, people shifting, gesturing, pointing at papers at each other. Kelsey's voice broke through once, high and frantic, muffled by the double-paned glass. No one echoed her, then silence, then Dylan's voice, low but clear enough that it cut through the wall like a knife through ice. "I wouldn't have known what to do without Sarah," he said. "She coached me every night after hours. She walked me through everything. She saved this project, not me, not Kelsey." A pause, then murmurs, chairs shifting, paper rustling. And Caroline's voice, calm and lethal. "So who promoted whom exactly?" I closed my eyes. Inside, someone coughed. Kelsey tried to recover. I could hear her through the vent above the door, words tumbling out, sharp, defensive. "Look, I was managing the narrative for the board. That's a strategic skill. Dylan needed the experience, and Sarah was just being supportive. It's called succession planning." She was spinning so fast I thought she might lift off. Then the CEO spoke. Not loud, not angry. "Enough." No one said another word for nearly a minute. A few seconds later, the door creaked open. The assistant leaned out, eyes wide. "Sarah, they'd like a moment. Could you step outside?" I nodded. No drama, no sighs. I stood, folder still in hand, and walked out slow. Not a performance, just peace. Behind me, the temperature had changed. You could feel it even through the hallway's sterile air. The applause that used to follow Kelsey's LinkedIn posts was gone, replaced by something colder, sharper. I passed the receptionist. She glanced up at me like I was someone new. "Would you like coffee while you wait?" she asked. I almost laughed. "No thanks," I said. "I've had enough bitterness for 1 quarter." Outside the glass, I caught one last glimpse. Kelsey sat in the center of the room, shoulders rounded, makeup slightly smudged, like she finally realized the stage lights were never hers to begin with. She wasn't talking anymore, wasn't smiling, just staring at the table like it might offer her a refund. And the CEO, he wasn't looking at her. He was holding the coaching logs, reading and nodding. I turned away before the door could open again. Let them finish their reckoning. I'd already had mine. And that smirk, the one that started all this, the one that tried to shrink me down to available resource, it was gone. Burned off the face of the girl who thought she could lead with a selfie and a spreadsheet she never built. I didn't need applause. I'd rewritten the ending. And this time, the truth spoke louder than the branding. You're the real MVPs of the office jungle. Thanks for watching. Smash that subscribe button, or the coffee pot might just forget your next brew. I'm sorry, Jen, they've gone with someone else. That's what they said, someone else. Not better, not more experienced. Not even in the room when we whiteboarded version 4 of the algorithm that landed us on that Forbes tech to watch list. No, someone else just meant not you. The CEO couldn't look me in the eye when he said it, like the lie might vaporize him on contact. My promotion to CTO was never even on the table. Not really. It was a dance. They let me believe I was leading it, and then they cut the music. So instead, they brought in Marcus. Big smile, cold handshake. Wore his vision like it was a cologne, cheap, overbearing, and guaranteed to give you a migraine. Day one, he called a meeting titled Strategic Evolution. I knew then it wasn't about progress, it was about pruning. And I was first on the list. I sat through his slide deck of buzzwords and veiled insults like a churchgoer in the front pew. Silent, smiling, dying inside. Decentralized efficiency, resource optimization, legacy personnel realignment. That last one? That was me, legacy, like a floppy disk. He never said it outright, but the message was clear. The woman who built Apex Sentry's core product had become an inconvenience. Oh, and before I forget, if you're enjoying this story, just hate Marcus already, do me a favor, tap that subscribe button and throw us a like. Seriously, 90% of folks don't subscribe even though they binge these stories on the drive home or while cooking pasta. It means a lot to the team, keeps the lights on and the revenge hot. Now, back to the slow motion train wreck that was my demotion. My name stopped appearing on high priority email threads. My dev leads got reassigned without so much as a Slack ping. Marcus started inviting himself to my project reviews like a nosy uncle with a clipboard. I once caught him scrolling LinkedIn during a sprint demo. When I paused and asked if he had any feedback, he just grinned and said, "You run a tight ship for now." For now. I'd been at Apex 6 years. That algorithm wasn't just code, it was sweat, tears, and 3 birthdays I missed while pulling 14-hour days debugging prediction drift. Before I joined, Apex Sentry was just a cloud folder and a funding round. I brought the spine. And now I was being handed my coat. It wasn't blatant at first. That's the art of modern corporate betrayal, death by 1,000 polite cuts. I wasn't excluded, I was given space to focus. I wasn't demoted, I was refocused on core competencies. And Marcus? He was just aligning leadership with market strategy. Every time I heard one of those phrases, I felt a little piece of me grind its teeth. The final straw came wrapped in a quarterly planning doc. A new project, something called Sentinel Horizon, was being launched. Same tech stack, same logic flow, same predictive skeleton I had built from scratch, but this one was Marcus-led. He'd gutted my architecture, rebranded it, and was now parading it around like he'd carved it with his bare hands. I confronted him once. Just once. "Why not just ask me to help?" He laughed, and said, "You're too close to it, Jennifer. You can't scale emotion. Can't scale emotion." That night I stayed late, not to work, not to cry, but to think. I remembered something from years ago before Apex, before all of this. A document I'd had notarized. A clause buried deep in the fine print of a licensing agreement no one had bothered to read. That night I didn't rage. I didn't vent. I just smiled. Packed up my bag and whispered to myself, let them dig the hole. I already own the coffin. They moved my nameplate. That was the first real sign. Not an email, not a meeting, just a janitor awkwardly holding my placard, asking if I preferred the new quiet desk by the server room. That corner was where interns went to cry and laptops went to die. I nodded, smiled like it didn't sting, and wheeled my chair over with the grace of a woman already halfway to vengeance. Then came the team shuffle. Without warning, my 2 senior engineers, people I'd trained, people who could read my shorthand and commit messages, were reassigned to cross-functional exposure under Marcus's new pet director. No heads up, no performance reviews, just a calendar invite labeled org update. I sat in that Zoom meeting like a stranger at my own wedding. They didn't even look me in the eye. When I asked Marcus about it, he chuckled and said, "We're just democratizing innovation." Democratizing my ass. You don't move top performers off the backbone of your flagship product unless you're trying to burn the whole skeleton and blame the ashes on someone else. I played dumb. That's what you do when you're circling the drain in corporate America. You smile, you document, and you prepare the eulogy for your position. Every Slack thread that smelled off, saved. Every odd calendar change, screenshot. Every email that hinted at strategic restructuring without ever using the word termination, forwarded to a private folder labeled insurance. Then came the compliance review out of nowhere. Legal flagged my algorithm's audit trail for inconsistencies that had never existed in 6 product cycles. I'd kept the version logs tighter than a drum. Every change, every line, every pull request was logged and cross-referenced with deployment notes. But suddenly, they were concerned about performance. Not errors, performance. The kind of fuzzy metric you can twist like a balloon animal if you want to make it bark or explode. Marcus started CCing himself on my sprint reviews. Then he stopped showing up entirely but still managed to forward my status updates to legal with little notes like concern, velocity stagnation, or request clarification on ownership of V1 logic. Not your work is subpar. No, just enough doubt to poison the well without getting his hands dirty. Meanwhile, I kept showing up. Hair done, smile on, giving clean updates, hitting deadlines, staying one polite sentence ahead of losing it. Because I knew the game. I knew that if I so much as raised my voice, I'd go from senior leader to emotional liability before lunch. The real dagger came in a confidential chat with HR. The HR rep, soft-spoken woman who looked like she hated conflict more than moldy Tupperware, asked to meet off the record. She leaned in like we were sharing secrets over wine instead of sitting in a beige conference room filled with passive-aggressive affirmation posters. I shouldn't be telling you this, she whispered. But Marcus has been positioning things, laying groundwork. Groundwork for what? She hesitated, swallowed, to move you out. For cause, if possible. There it was, the phrase, for cause. Not a layoff, not a reorg, not budget cuts. They weren't just planning to get rid of me, they were planning to bury me with paperwork that made it look like I had failed, like I deserved it. I walked out of that meeting into the parking garage and sat in my car for 20 minutes. Not crying, not shaking, just still. So still I could hear the tick of my turn signal and the faint hum of a vent I'd never noticed before. They wanted to erase me. Not just my role, but my legacy. My work, my code. The very thing that made them worth the $150 million valuation they were quietly bragging about to investors. And the worst part, it was working. Bit by bit, they were pushing me to break first. But they didn't know what I'd written before any of them ever heard the name Apex Sentry. They didn't know about Clause 3.4c. Hell, they didn't even read the onboarding packet I handed in when I joined, too busy drinking their own Kool-Aid and counting future bonuses. I didn't break, I got sharper. Every meeting I was left out of, I logged the timestamp. Every performance flag, I filed the response. Every whisper of doubt from Marcus, I stitched it into the fabric of my backup plan. This wasn't paranoia, this was preservation. And if Marcus wanted a case, I'd let him build it, brick by brick, right into a wall he wouldn't see until it collapsed on him. The meeting wasn't on my calendar. That should have told me everything. It was 9:04 a.m. on a Wednesday, and my badge didn't work on the elevator to floor 7. I had to be buzzed in by one of Marcus's assistants, new girl, fresh out of business school with motivational quotes in her email signature. "You're needed in conference room C," she said with a weird smile, like she was reading a script no one told me existed. Inside, Marcus, HR, legal, 2 laptops open, a folder already waiting in front of my chair. That folder had my name on it in thick black ink, bold, neat, and final, like a tombstone. "Jennifer," Marcus began, voice smooth like cold coffee, "this isn't easy. That's how you know they are about to kill something, when they say it's hard for them. We've reviewed the last 3 quarters of deliverables and unfortunately, given repeated performance delays, compliance flags, and internal restructuring, we have no choice but to terminate your employment, effective immediately." He didn't flinch when he said it, didn't even blink. HR pushed a pen toward me like it was loaded. "For cause," she added softly, like it'd hurt less if she whispered it. I flipped the folder open. Standard corporate jargon. Pages of legalese meant to drown you in blame until you signed just to breathe again. At the bottom, the cherry on top, a statement declaring I had failed to meet expectations and was in breach of performance metrics Marcus had helpfully redefined 2 weeks ago with no warning. No severance. No stock acceleration. No grace period. Just gone. "Will I be allowed to collect my personal items?" I asked calmly. "Yes," Marcus said. "Escort's waiting at your desk." I nodded, took the pen, signed my name like I was approving a receipt for fries I didn't order. The pen didn't even wobble. If they were expecting tears, protests, a fiery monologue about injustice, they were about to be real disappointed. "You'll get nothing from the $150 million, Marcus said as I stood. His smile was made of brass and ego. "Nothing," he repeated, just in case I didn't catch it the first time. I looked him dead in the eye, tilted my head like I was admiring a bug under a glass. "I understand," I said, and I meant it. I understood perfectly. My walk back to the desk was quiet. eyes peeked over monitors, unsure whether to nod, look away, or pretend they didn't hear the whisper storm swirling around me. I just smiled, packed my things, one mug, one photo, one stress ball shaped like a brain, and slid my office keycard into the trash. As the escort led me past the product roadmap wall, I caught a glimpse of version 6 mockups, my mockups, the ones I sketched on a flight to Austin when everyone else was sleeping. They'd already slapped a new name on it, Horizon Suite. Cute. Outside, the sun was too bright. I had no job, no title, no place on the org chart. But I had something they didn't: time. Because while Marcus was busy rehearsing his "we've turned the corner" lines for the buyer pitch, I was already thinking 2 steps ahead, already picturing the binder sitting in my fireproof cabinet, already remembering the signature, the date, the seal, and the clause. Clause 3.4c, short, sharp, airtight. In the event of termination for cause, full intellectual property rights shall revert to the original grantor. 6 years ago, when I joined Apex, I didn't hand them the algorithm. I licensed it, with terms, with limits, with teeth. They didn't know. They never read the grant, and now they triggered it themselves. I wasn't just walking away. I was letting them walk right into the furnace with their eyes wide open, holding the match. The house was dead quiet when I got home. No Slack pings, no Zoom dings, no office badge humming against a reader. Just the low hum of my fridge and the soft creak of the mail slot rattling in the wind. I poured myself a glass of orange juice like it was champagne and walked straight to the back room, the one I used to call the cave when I first started building the prototype of the algorithm that made Apex worth its gold-plated investor deck. The drawer was bottom right. Behind old tax documents, warranty booklets, and a comically thick manual for a printer I'd long since thrown out. I hadn't touched it in 6 years. I slid it open like I was handling a live wire. There it was, the original license grant. Crisp, protected in a plastic sleeve, sealed and notarized on February 3rd, back when Apex was still in stealth mode, and I was just a freelancer with too many ideas and a knack for prediction models. Reading it again was like rereading a forgotten love letter, only now it felt more like a sword than a sentiment. Clause 3.4c. In the event of termination for cause, full intellectual property rights shall revert to the original grantor effective immediately upon notification of said termination. Not maybe, not subject to review, not pending arbitration. Just revert. Back then, it was a safety net. A gut instinct. I'd poured 2 years of my life into the early versions of the algorithm. I didn't want to give it away to a startup I barely trusted beyond the founders. So we drafted the license as a conditional grant. They could use it while I worked there in good faith. But if they ever turned on me, it went back in my hands, no negotiation, no warning. And Marcus had just fired me. For cause, on record, in writing. They'd pulled the pin without even knowing there was a grenade attached. I opened my laptop and started typing. Not an angry blog post. Not a LinkedIn sob story. No, an email. Subject line, reactivation inquiry, clause 3.4c. I sent it to a small law firm in Palo Alto, not one of the flashy ones with neon logos and podcast sponsors. This firm was 3 women, one paralegal, and a terrifying reputation for quietly tearing billion-dollar companies to shreds when it came to IP disputes. A friend of mine had once called them smiling assassins in cardigans. They replied within the hour. We reviewed the attached grant. Clause 3.4c is enforceable. Their acquisition process, if ongoing, may already be in violation depending on how the IP is represented. Shall we proceed? No drama. No, we'll need a week. Just, shall we proceed? I replied, yes. I'll begin documentation. Then I got to work. I opened a fresh spreadsheet, labeled it Timeline of Hostile Actions. I went back through emails, Slack threads, meeting invites, every team reassignment, every project delay, every performance flag Marcus had used to fabricate a case. I cross-referenced it with deployment logs and Sprint RetroS, proof that nothing had been off schedule until he started tinkering with team structures and siphoning off my engineers. I dug out calendar entries that showed when Marcus began attending meetings I'd previously led, only to hijack them and later claim lack of leadership clarity. I saved audio from a voice message he accidentally sent to the wrong group chat. Just 6 seconds. We need to get her off the books by Q3 or it looks bad to the board. I highlighted that one in yellow. Then came the legal filings. I knew lawyers sent a formal letter to Apex's general counsel, a certified notice of IP reversion under the terms of the original grant. It was short, clinical, and deadly. No one at Apex responded, not officially, but I saw the linked inactivity. Marcus started liking posts from recruiters. The VP of engineering posted a tone-deaf meme about unexpected challenges. My former team lead updated her title to interim platform director. And suddenly, my name was gone from the press release drafts I wasn't supposed to know about. They thought I'd vanished. But I was still there, documenting, watching, building the fuse. This wasn't a tantrum. This wasn't revenge. This was precision. The kind of quiet fury that doesn't scream in meetings or throw laptops. It files evidence. It sets legal traps. It waits for signatures and then slides the trapdoor open beneath the deal everyone's banking their bonuses on. Marcus had taken my title, but he'd also activated the one clause that made him the architect of his own downfall, and I wasn't going to stop him. I was going to let him keep walking, right into my binder. The first bug showed up 3 days after I was escorted out. Not a critical one, just a logic inconsistency in the data pipeline that fed user behavior predictions. It wouldn't crash the system, but it would throw off accuracy metrics by just enough to make executives sweat. Then came another, and another. A cascading mess of edge case failures and broken queries no one knew how to untangle because the devs who used to fix them had been reassigned by Marcus. Funny how pulling the Jenga pieces out for a promotion party always ends the same way. I watched it unfold from a distance, quietly, no gloating, just observation. Friend in QA messaged me from her personal phone. Do you know anything about this Horizon anomaly flag? I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The system was built like a cathedral, complex, beautiful, and unforgiving to anyone who thought duct tape and optimism could replace the blueprints. Without me and the team I'd nurtured, it was only a matter of time before it began to groan under its own weight. By week 2, clients were asking questions. Support tickets ballooned. Customer success kept reusing the same script. We're adjusting to new workflows, which is corporate for we fired the person who knew what she was doing and now we're eating ramen in the server room. I didn't say a word online, no tweets, no cryptic LinkedIn posts, no shadow blogging under a pseudonym, but I wasn't quiet either. I picked up my phone and called Daniel Tran. Daniel was an ex-colleague, now working at a mid-tier consultancy that handled risk assessments for major M&A deals. We hadn't talked since Apex's Series B, but when I said, hey, remember that IP clause I told you about over drinks once? His reply was a long, slow, oh, that clause. I sent him a sanitized version of the license agreement. No identifying marks, just enough redacted to keep it technically anonymous, but detailed enough for someone familiar with Apex to connect dots if they were, say, on a call with a buyer. Which, as luck would have it, Daniel was. Deloitte had been tapped to do due diligence on Apex's IP portfolio as part of the $150M acquisition. A quiet deal, still under NDA, but nothing stays quiet when you feed it to the right mouths. A week later, I got a message. Not from Daniel, not directly. Came from a recruiter I didn't know, asking if I was open to strategic advisory roles in the AI compliance space. The timing was suspicious. The wording was curious, and the email signature, from a boutique firm that just happened to do advisory support for acquisition legal teams. Subtle, professional, just enough plausible deniability. I ignored it. Instead, I started preparing version 2 of the binder, one for external eyes only. Clean timeline. References to internal language used by Marcus and HR. Summarized risk assessments from my attorneys showing how Clause 3.4c affected asset transfer rights. Not the full bomb, just the fuse and a few sparks. It worked. By week 4, chatter increased. I heard from an old mentor that investors had started asking, "Where's Jennifer?" The CEO had no good answer. She moved on, he'd said in one meeting, before pivoting to a slide deck on Q4 projections. But people could smell the rot under the polish. You don't just move on when you're the architect of the entire product your company is selling for 9-figure sum. Meanwhile, Marcus doubled down. He posted a smiling photo with the team at an off-site retreat. Captioned it, "Futures looking bright at Apex Sentry." I saved it to a folder titled Overconfidence, Exhibit C. What Marcus didn't know, what no one in that photo knew, was that the buyer's legal team had begun asking their own questions now. Questions like, who originally created this algorithm? Is there documentation of full IP assignment? Was any portion of the core engine developed before the founder's official employment? Questions that smell like blood. They didn't have answers, because they'd never bothered to ask them when I joined. They'd seen a smart woman with a working product and thought, how lucky are we? They just assumed it was theirs. Now, with 7 figures on the table and lawyers circling like hawks, those assumptions were turning into liabilities. The kind that trigger delays, the kind that spook investors, the kind that end deals, and I didn't have to do a thing. Just sit behind the curtain, watch them squirm, and wait for the moment someone in a suit would lean forward in a room full of nervous executives and say, "Someone needs to talk to Jennifer." It started with a footnote. Page 87 of a vendor audit report. A junior due diligence intern, barely out of college, probably still figuring out how to expense lunch, flagged an anomaly in Apex's license registry. Buried deep in a quarterly compliance archive, there it was, a line item referencing algorithm license conditional use grantor, J. Fields, just one line, no expiration date, no termination form, no attached amendment. The intern, bless their thorough little heart, added a single comment. Unusual grant structure? Needs clarification on IP ownership. That comment landed on a shared doc the buyer's legal team was quietly reviewing, which, in turn, sparked a 9:43 p.m. email from a junior associate to Apex's legal counsel. Subject, urgent follow-up. Historical IP agreements origin unclear. Marcus saw the ping the next morning and dismissed it faster than a coffee stain on his button down. Boilerplate, he said in a meeting, waving his hand like he was swatting away a fly. Jennifer signed it away years ago. HR has the papers. She's not part of the conversation anymore. Except she was, because in a house across town I was printing. Every clause, every email, every revision log, every meeting note, color-coded tabs, clean headers, chronological order. I wasn't just building a binder, I was building a guided missile. It had taken weeks to shape, but now it was ready. Binder V 3.0 External Deployment Edition. The first page, a notarized copy of the original grant. Second page, a dated organizational chart showing my title and scope at the time the algorithm launched. Third page, an email from Apex's co-founder thanking me for licensing your incredible engine to power our future. After that came screenshots, Slack exports, internal metrics, and a timeline so meticulously detailed it read like a crime scene reconstruction. Not angry, not accusatory, just precise. I didn't want their apology. I wanted their silence to collapse under the weight of evidence. Meanwhile, Apex was crumbling behind the glass. Devs were still fighting with buggy deployments and patching code they didn't write. Sales was dancing around roadmap questions they couldn't answer. Product managers were rewriting narratives on slide decks to mask that the new engine was just my legacy model with some lipstick and a new logo. And the buyers? The buyers had started whispering. One investor asked outright in a private strategy session, if Jennifer built the engine, and she's gone, what exactly are we buying? No one had a clean answer. They tried to pull up my employment contract to show a blanket IP assignment, but there was a gap, a missing document, something legal kept insisting must exist but couldn't find in any drive, filing cabinet, or archive. That's because it didn't exist, because I never gave them full assignment, because I licensed it. Marcus tried to fix it the way men like him always do, confident emails, half-truths, and pressure. He told the board it was a minor hiccup and a formality. He told the buyers it was cleaned up years ago. He didn't know I was already talking to their lead counsel through the proper, silent channels. He didn't know that Deloitte's internal Slack had a channel now named #IP Field Day. He didn't know that 3 of the deal's biggest advocates had gone suspiciously quiet after being looped into an FYI only memo titled Licensing Irregularity Apex Core Model. By Friday, the deal room had stalled. Lawyers started coming in earlier. Execs started speaking softer. Investors stopped returning Marcus's calls with the same enthusiasm. Apex still hadn't seen the full binder, but they felt it like a storm in the distance. Pressure shifting, wind changing. The kind of quiet that makes animals freeze and humans forget why they were ever confident to begin with. At my kitchen table, I hole-punched the last page, clipped it into place, ran my finger over the spine like a pianist touching ivory. It was ready. The air tasted electric. They thought they were negotiating a sale, but what they were really doing was walking into my exhibit. The room was glass, of course it was. They always loved the glass rooms. Transparent, polished, open concept accountability with $800 chairs and a curated view of the skyline behind them. A monument to everything they think makes them invincible. It was just after 10. The buyer's team had flown in that morning, buttoned up, sleep-deprived, and escorted by Apex's chief legal counsel like visiting royalty. The board was seated, smiling like prom chaperones. Water bottles lined the table. The pens were Montblanc. The folders were crested with silver foil logos and color-coded tabs. A notary sat quietly in the corner like a polite executioner. Marcus stood at the head of the table in his fitted navy suit. Could smell the cologne from the hallway. He was on slide 6 of a 12-slide victory lap, clicker in one hand, fake humility in the other. This acquisition is not just about growth, he was saying. It's about synergy, scale, and unlocking new possibilities with the platform we've built. The man had never written a line of code. He couldn't tell a Boolean from a bagel. I pushed open the glass door. The room turned, not in panic, not in outrage, just confusion. Because I didn't belong there, not anymore. I had no badge, no title, no authority, but I had the binder. Jennifer, Marcus said, blinking, smile twitching at the edges. I don't think this is a closed session. I know, I said, walking calmly to the empty chair near the middle. I set the binder down, neat, deliberate, quiet enough to be surgical. No one stopped me, no one moved. The buyer's lead counsel gave me a slow, narrowing glance, not alarmed, curious, like a chess player watching an unexpected knight enter the board. I didn't greet anyone, didn't apologize, I simply opened the binder. The sound of its spine clicking open was louder than it should have been. Paper whispered against paper. Marcus cleared his throat, trying to take back control. As I was saying, we've positioned Apex Sentry as the market leader in predictive data solutions, and our IP portfolio is robust. And before you sign anything, I said, interrupting him without raising my voice, you should probably see this. I slid the binder forward, right down the middle of the table. No drama, no flourish, just precision. The buyer's counsel didn't reach for it immediately, but his eyes were already locked on the tab marked Clause 3.4c. Someone at the far end whispered, "What is this?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The trap was set. The oxygen had shifted. and Marcus, still standing there, clicker in hand, looked like a man suddenly realizing the stage beneath him wasn't made of wood after all. It was ice, and it was cracking. The buyer's attorney reached for the binder like it might bite. He pulled it closer, adjusted his glasses, and opened to the first page, index tab marked in clean red ink, Foundational IP Grant Agreement. He scanned it the way lawyers do when they expect to swat away a nuisance, not confront a bomb. The moment he hit line 12, his brow furrowed. 2 pages later, his lips parted just slightly. Then came the real reaction. His hand froze halfway through flipping, and his voice dropped into that stunned legal register that's halfway between panic and disbelief. Wait, is this notarized? Silence. The notary in the corner cleared her throat softly. The attorney didn't even look up, just turned the page with robotic precision until he found it, the gold seal. The signature, the date, February 3rd, 6 years prior. My name, the algorithm, and then the hammer, clause 3.4c. In the event of termination for cause, all intellectual property rights shall revert in full to the grantor, effective immediately upon notification of said termination. He read it again, out loud this time. This invalidates the IP transfer. It's not theirs to sell. A beat. Then the sound of a chair shifting as one of the board members leaned forward. What do you mean? I mean, the attorney said slowly, eyes still on the document. This clause, if legally binding and uncontested, reverts all rights to the algorithm back to Miss Fields. Not Apex, not the board, not the current leadership. But she was employed, another board member stammered. Yes, the attorney replied. And this document is dated before that employment began. This isn't a work-for-hire arrangement, it's a license. And it includes a trigger condition they just activated. All heads turned toward Marcus. His face was frozen like someone had yanked the battery from his spine. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. She signed an employee IP assignment when she onboarded. HR has it? No, I said softly. You thought I did, but I flagged it during onboarding. There's an email trail, check with Sarah in legal. I refused to duplicate the license agreement. You guys never followed up, more murmuring now. One of the investor reps whispered something to another who looked visibly pale. The woman from Deloitte, silent until now, pulled out her phone and began typing rapidly. Marcus stepped toward the binder, voice cracking. This is absurd. It's old. It's irrelevant. We've invested, the buyer's counsel cut him off. Marcus, you've built your product on an asset you don't own. You've marketed it, packaged it, and negotiated a sale based on intellectual property that legally has already reverted to someone else. That's not a paperwork issue. That's a misrepresentation. The words landed like stones. Then this is a negotiation issue, Marcus said, trying to recover, trying to charm. We can work something out, I'm sure Jennifer's willing to, I said nothing. I didn't nod, I didn't smile, I didn't blink, I just watched. Watched as the temperature in the room dropped 15 degrees. Watched as the board realized they hadn't just underestimated me, they'd underestimated the very foundation of the deal. Watched as the fantasy of a clean $150 million exit evaporated into contractual quicksand. And through it all, I stayed still. Not gloating, not smug, just present, because I wasn't there to make a scene. I was there to remind them what they'd tried to bury. Now that it was on the table, signed, sealed, and staring them in the face, there was only one question left hanging in the air, heavy and suffocating. What the hell happens now? The buyer's attorney closed the binder like it was radioactive. He looked across the table, past Marcus, past the board, past the overpriced branding on the folder in front of him, and said what everyone in the room was now too afraid to admit out loud. Can't acquire a company whose core IP is in dispute. That was it, one sentence. The oxygen left the room. No, wait, Marcus started, voice rising, hands spread like he was defusing a bomb with charisma alone. You're overreacting. This is just a documentation gap. We can clarify, we can. My lawyer stood up, calm as ever, and placed a single envelope on the table. Certified reversion notice, she said, filed this morning. Legal copy stamped by the Secretary of State. Clause 3.4c is now officially executed. She sat back down. Marcus looked like a man watching his parachute detach mid-jump. You can't, this isn't valid, this is sabotage. The buyer's counsel didn't flinch. You sold something you don't own, and that was it. The deal detonated right there in that glass box. Board members started yelling, not at me, at Marcus. Questions flew like shrapnel. Why wasn't this vetted? How did legal miss this? Did you know about this clause? One of them slammed their folder shut and stormed out without another word. Another pointed a trembling finger at Marcus and said, this is intentional misrepresentation. We are now personally liable if this isn't contained. Someone tried to call the CEO, who hadn't even shown up. Marcus was told to leave the room. Not asked, told. He looked at me as he gathered his things. I didn't smile. I didn't blink. I just tilted my head slightly as if to say, you did this to yourself. Once the door clicked shut behind him, the silence lingered. Everyone was staring at me now, some with confusion, some with panic, one or two with a flicker of admiration they'd never admit. And finally, I spoke. You didn't just fire me, I said, voice low, steady. You fired the algorithm. I stood up, gathered my binder, and walked out. I didn't run. I didn't look back because I didn't have to. 3 days later, the buyer contacted my attorney. We're still interested, their lead counsel said, but with her, not Apex, not the shell of what was left, me. The terms came quick: Chief Innovation Officer, direct equity, full recognition as founder of the core algorithm, independent authority over roadmap direction, no Marcus, no Apex leadership team, clean slate, real ownership. I didn't say yes right away. I made them work for it. Negotiated every clause, every dollar, every title and vesting condition. Not because I needed revenge, but because I finally understood the value of what I built. Of what I was, Marcus quietly removed. The board issued a vague statement about leadership restructuring. Internal investigations followed. His name scrubbed from the press cycle. My name front and center, not as an employee, not as a footnote, but as the architect. The platform now carried my signature. Publicly, permanently, they tried to bury me, but I was the foundation. So when the ink dried on the new contract and I finally stepped into my new office with my name on the door and my algorithm in the code, I didn't gloat. I just took a deep breath, looked out at the skyline, and thought, I didn't lose the $150 million. I just waited for it to come to me. Thanks for watching, you cubicle warriors. Hit that subscribe button. Unless you're my old boss, then you're on your own. Revenge of the coffee pot strikes again.